Okay, hello, good evening. So now we are meeting after the prelims results are already out. Any one of you writing the mains? Some of you, okay. Now, who among you are preparing for their first attempt? अगला एग्जाम देना है आपको. All right. And some of you then I am assuming have already appeared for the examination previously. Okay, good. So the idea is very simple. Why we discuss previous year's questions is so that we have an understanding of what we are doing. And this awareness of what the task is goes into simplifying our preparation. Otherwise there are a lot of stories. These days there are a lot of topper talks also happening. So please watch them if you have time so that you understand what went into their preparation. And thereby you would realize that ultimately you would have to reach out to a personalized strategy. Generally there are things which would work, but where exactly do you stand is the place from where you will start walking. Alright, so we are going to discuss what is common in this examination, and if it works for you, fair enough, fine. Alright, so as I do in any kind of discussion related with this examination, I always go back to the syllabus. Now many people would feel that syllabus is something that we already know, why to remember it again? Now you should understand that syllabus provides you a focal length. This is what is the starting point, because the UPSC doesn't tell you the reading list. The UPSC does not tell you exactly what it is looking at. So whatever UPSC tells us is our first starting point. It is not a bad idea to have the syllabus at hand while you are preparing and focus on some of the words. When you are in an uncertain situation in the examination, suppose a question comes which you think is an outlier, suppose a question comes which you think you have not prepared for, taking the help of the words from the syllabus, you can construct a reasonable answer, which would be better than leaving the question, right? Don't write things that you don't know about. So that means that don't write things which are wrong, obviously, in the context, but you can try a reasonable answer. So that word, one word, reasonableness or reason, is what differentiates us as human beings from other animals. And UPSC answers are also expecting reasonableness. If you are saying something, it should be clear and it should have a clear reason conveyed to the examiner, and you are always doing it in the context of the question which has been asked. So simply looking at the syllabus, you find India and its neighborhood relations, meaning close to our home what is happening, just as other parts of the syllabus are about domestic policy. This part of the syllabus, GS2 IR section, is about external policy of India. So it starts with India and India's surroundings. So that is something that you should pay close attention to, right? And you can keep on noting the words, relations. Bilateral, regional, global groupings and agreements involving India and or affecting India's interests. So the key word here is India's interests. No matter what you are reading, if you can bring in India's perspective into that, and most of the questions are about India, India's interests. All right. So suppose a question which we will see does not mention India. So that means that if you can bring in India into the answer, that your purpose would be well served. Effect of policies and politics of developed and developing. Developed and developing is a keyword. How do you look at the world? There are so many countries. So then there are broad ways of looking at countries. Countries east, west, developed, developing, north, south, south, south. So now ये term आपने. These are various ways in which we categorize countries, either in terms of their simple geographical location or in terms of broader value systems that they uphold and thereby their interest in those geographies and values in those geographies, or in terms of their economic or development trajectory, developed. Right, so north, south, 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 this is a development terminology. All right, so you please notice developed and developing. Right, so if there is a question on climate change, if there is a question on SDGs, if there is a question on energy, your perspective can become refined if you can locate what kind of country is in India, and does India share its interest with other countries. So you will realize that India also is a developing country. So broadly we can say that India shares interests with developing countries, right? And of course the syllabus, the explicit point is that whatever is happening in other countries may have an impact on India. So keep an eye on that. Then Indian diaspora, meaning the diaspora is people of Indian origin who are living outside of the borders of Republic of India. All right. Many of them may be citizens of other countries, still they remain people of Indian origin, like you must have celebrated Rishi Sunak becoming the Prime Minister. But he is not an Indian citizen, right? He is of Indian origin. But there are also people who are Indian citizens who are living outside for work, for education. All right, so this is Indian diaspora. So by definition, the idea is very simple. What is the diaspora you should know, and then where are the diaspora spread out? What are the prominent names? What are they doing? All right, these kinds of things. We'll see questions, how it reflects in questions. And the last part is important: international institutions, agencies, fora, which means simply international organizations of all kinds. All right, and look at the word that UPSC gives you to focus on: structure and mandate. Any organization has to be studied in terms of how is it constituted, who are the members, how does it take its decisions, where does its funding come from, all right, and mandate, what is it that it is supposed to do, all right, what is its purpose. So this clarity then translates into your preparation, that whenever you are reading something, these words are there, right, and then you will realize that you are better able to relate. Now thereby, looking at previous year's questions is the second step. All right, syllabus, you already know the syllabus, looking at the previous year's question. Now if you look at previous year's question, there are few things, the simple things which we should keep aside. IR accounts for 50 marks worth of questions in the examination in GS2. Since 2016-17, the pattern of the structure of the paper is such that there are 4 questions from IR. 2 of them are 10 markers, which generally you will find at serial numbers 9 and 10. 2 of them are 15 markers, I'm sorry, which you will find generally at serial numbers 19 and 20. So you are aware. So this examination is also about exam awareness, not only about content awareness, but also about exam awareness. Ultimately, it is an exam. So that is there. Now, another simple idea. So how much is it that you are expected to write? 10 markers are for 150 words, 20 markers are for 250 words, meaning 800 words in all that you will be writing your answers for. But if you write anywhere between 600 to 800 words, it is fine, depending on how much you think you need to write. So don't go over the word limit, because that eats into your time. All right, time for writing other answers. That's the simple logic. But if you remain under the word limit, reasonably under the word limit, it's not a problem. All right, if you can sufficiently convey your ideas in fewer words. So that's the task that is there every year to each of the aspirant. It is there for you as well, right? You are neither the first generation or the last generation who will be writing the examination, all right, the mains examination. Now, another abstract thing, this is explicit, we know how many marks, how many questions, is can we classify the questions into certain categories? Yes, we can. We generally see mostly questions come from relations, all right. Number 1 is relations, right. Number 2 is organizations. These are fairly commonly asked questions: relations, organizations. So thereby prioritization comes into picture. There may be multiple countries with whom India has relations, but there are only a handful of countries which are very important. All right, so countries in the neighborhood are obviously very important, but then countries like United States or Russia or China or Japan, these are some of the few countries which in any year would be important, and also a grouping of countries called European Union. Right, so that fairly reduces your focus. कि किन पे ज़्यादा focus करना है सब कुछ पढ़ते हुए भी. Relations, organizations, of course, the question would be about an organization, what it does, and thereby challenges, opportunities, etc. All right, and then there is diaspora-related questions. Now, diaspora-related questions appear intermittently. You will not find them every year. So far, 2017-18 and 2020. In the changed pattern after 2013, we have seen diaspora-related questions, all right? And then there are questions which we can broadly categorize as questions related with any current phenomenon, all right? Any current phenomenon, any current development, whereby we can say questions related with issues, all right? Issues, important issues, economic issues, development issues, or as you could see last year, climate and energy related issues, right? So relations, organizations fairly regularly, right? Regularly, diaspora intermittently, and issue-based questions. But it is not to say that you cannot think of them as connected, linked. Any question on any relation can also be about an issues in the relationship. All right? And while you are writing answers, you are ultimately bringing out issues. So neither the syllabus in different papers is watertight compartment. You will see questions from subject matter of one paper appear in another paper, right? Fairly regularly it happens. Similarly, if you have learned something in one paper, you will always be able to apply it as an example, thereby value addition in other papers. So look at the examination and the syllabus of different papers as an integrated whole. It is not simply GS1, GS2, GS3, GS4. It is continuation of gaining knowledge, and for the purpose of organization, it has been divided into different subjects, right? But everything is interconnected. Thereby, what is this examination testing? Can we have some formula for that? Now remember, there is no objective way in which we can ascertain. It's only my view in the way I have seen the question papers throughout the years. So we can say that UPSC is testing or is trying to test. It is blind to your abilities, capabilities, it doesn't know you. So it is trying to test one, awareness. Are you aware? After awareness comes understanding, right? So this is the knowledge part, awareness, understanding. And then the next part is its application. So you are doing the application in terms of writing answers. So that we can call problem solving, all right? Because every question is a problem, you're solving the problem, and all this has to be done within the tight limitations of the examination cycle, of the word limit, right? So ये आपका काम है. I hope you are aware, and this is something which is general for all the papers, right? So thereby, one simple suggestion that I always hold on to is newspaper reading. If you are not too myopic about it, if you are willing to open your eyes to different possibilities, newspaper reading perhaps has greatest value in this examination for all papers. All right, you will find your facts, your analysis and opinions, your quotes, your data through newspaper reading. All right, and thereby current affairs booklets also, they are simply being organized in terms of different papers, different sections, and that is what is happening there, right? So in my view, newspaper reading for this subject at least, and in all humility for other subjects also, is a good part of your preparation, provided that you start early and you develop your method to manage newspaper. Newspapers are not to be read throughout the day. कि आज दिन भर क्या किया? Newspaper पढ़ा, right? So only when you are reading newspaper as a vocation throughout the day, that becomes a problem. But if you keep newspaper as a part of your preparation process, allot 1 hour to it, and you understand that your first job is only to read the newspaper. You don't worry about remembering facts. If you are regular with it, sufficient repetition would mean you will gain enough information which you can use in the examination. All right. So after having these preliminaries, let's simply go to the questions. Since this is not a classroom, I'll take up some questions. I'll first show you 4 questions asked in a particular year. Then I'll ask you to focus on what may be the demand of the question, and then, if possible, the content of the answer, because these are previous year's questions. But the process, the thinking process, the method is relevant. The content may not be as much, right? And as far as possible, I'll also show you some contents. For the purpose of ease, I have simply termed the content that I will be showing you as quotes and substance. All right? We should have some words through which we can remember things. All right, so I'll be showing you quotes and substance, what is required, right? So this is 2022. We are starting with the latest iteration of the mains examination, 4 questions. As I told you, you could see 10 markers and 20 markers. Let's look at the first question. India is an age-old friend of Sri Lanka. It's a statement. You don't have to do anything with it. You just understand that it is a part of the question which is going to help you in some part of the answer. All right, the question follows. Discuss, so that's why it has been underlined. all right, discuss. This we can call the demand of the question in terms of the process that you have to follow, all right. What has to be discussed? India's role, all right, where in recent crisis in Sri Lanka, right, in the light of the preceding statement, right. So the statement is providing you the context. You don't need to pick a quarrel with the context. You just have to substantiate the context. Do you have any data, any quotes, any figures to start with? All right, so the answer can simply start by saying that India and Sri Lanka share age-old cultural, civilizational and intellectual ties. Or if you want to become fancy, you can say from the times of Emperor Ashoka to the current democratic era, India-Sri Lanka relations have withstood the test of time. All right, so you brought culture into it because Emperor Ashoka's son and daughter brought Buddhism to Sri Lanka. So you have done justice with that statement. You don't need to beat around the bush. 10 marker, you just understand that you should be able to have a broad idea. For example, 10% of word limit you can dedicate to the introduction, ideally. All right, so 15 words. If you can write your introduction in 15 words, your job would become easier, right? Discuss India's role. So India's role comes in the context of the recent Sri Lankan crisis. So transition. Transition to what? Transition to making the relevant point, and before that, contextualizing it. So here comes the current affairs. What kind of crisis was Sri Lanka facing? You can describe it in many ways, but it was an economic crisis owing to domestic and external factors. What are the domestic factors? Domestic factors are the political environment, transitions, the policies like tax regime, tax cuts that the Sri Lankan government had announced, or transition to organic agriculture, wholesale, overnight, all right. And then the external factors are factors like COVID-19. Now it strikes at the ability of countries to generate revenue. It happened to everyone. Sri Lanka's tourism revenue, Sri Lanka's remittances, Sri Lanka's exports were affected. So that's why it is also a BOP crisis. Now BOP happens towards the fag end of any economic crisis which is developing. All right, BOP is a manifestation of what had been going wrong. All right, it is telling you something wrong has happened before, right? So BOP crisis is there, and then comes the Ukraine-Russia war. All right, what kind of crisis? So again, it's an external factor. Thereby you will see prices of energy, food rise. All right, and when there is a crisis, you will also see that in some markets demands would be subdued. So this is all part of your understanding. Now you just convey it as the second part, which I said transition. Before you can say India, how India stepped in. All right, so you can basically simply point out and use certain jargons to start the next part of the answer, whereby saying that since Sri Lanka is a key focus of India's neighborhood first and Sagar approach, India provided the following support to Sri Lanka, right? And you know certain numbers, data. Any newspaper you are reading, you know that around 3.8 billion US dollars of assistance in cumulative term. We provided it in the form of credit for essential purposes, around 1.5 billion essential purchase. We provided it in the form of credit for energy purposes, petroleum supply, etc. We provided it in the form of deferment of debt payment. We provided it in the form of currency swap, right? So that is basically, these assistance is simple economic but different forms, all right, immediate, long term. And also then India, being one of the largest creditors of Sri Lanka, assisted it in obtaining a package from the IMF, all right. That is what India did. And then you can also add, if you know, that India has already been involved in helping Sri Lanka through development support. For example, our development support to Sri Lanka traditionally has been around 3 billion US dollars so far, right? Traditional. So we provided help in the time of crisis. We provided help in the time of, in general times also, normal times also. Ye kiya humne, and you now move towards conclusion. The above is important पहले हमने बता दिया था नेबरहुड फर्स्ट सागर, ईदर यूज इट फर्स्ट और यूज इट लेटर ऑन, ऑलराइट, टुवर्ड्स द कंक्लूजन. द अबव इज इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज crisis provides opportunity for external powers to intervene in India's neighborhood, and India's national interests are intrinsically linked with the stability of South Asia. All right. So meaning you are saying that it would not only strengthen India's relations with Sri Lanka, it would also be helpful for India's interests. बात समझ में आ गई आपको? Right. So that's how you weave a story through either quotes, context, data, right? तो याद बहुत कम चीजें करनी होती हैं, प्रैक्टिस करना होता है एक फ्रेमवर्क बना के. So that was the answer, right? Now, if you have any question, you can always raise your hands and I can take up the question. If not, then we will move on to the second question. Do you think that BIMSTEC is a parallel organization like the SARC? Question mark. Now, do you see the difference? This is a question which is a compound question in terms of discuss दे दिया है आपको. Discuss में आपको सब कुछ करना होता है. Explain, describe, analyze, right? And impress the examiner. I'll take your question. Now, this question is simply broken down into different parts. Right? Do you think BIMSTEC is a parallel organization like the SARC? Question mark. What are the similarities and dissimilarities between the two? Now, if you closely notice, first two questions are very linked. How can you answer the second question without answering the first question? All right, parallel organization, कोई technical meaning नहीं है इसका. Is it similar to it? Right, it is just like SARC. It is just another addition to the regional organizations of which India is a member. Substantive part is what are the similarities and dissimilarities between the two? How are Indian foreign policy objectives realized by forming this new organization? All right, so India's interest directly comes into this. Yes, what was your question? I agree with you. The simple answer to that would be I agree with you, because I simplified the approach. You want to make it complicated. I already said either bring the example of Ashoka. It's only a statement. It's only a context. It is not the question. In the context that Sri Lanka is always important for you. That is what it is saying. Any statement is an opinion about the relation. Your job is to say why, but that is not the question, by the way. If you see, it's an inverted commas. Simple rule of reading. A statement in inverted comma has to be read as a whole, not necessarily to be broken down into its parts. Unless ये question होता है यहाँ पे लगा के critically examine और discuss. Statement को discuss करने के लिए नहीं बोल रहा है ना. In the context of, context का मतलब समझते हैं आप? हाँ, तो context है. आप उसको touch कर सकते हैं पहले sentence को substantiate करके, जिसका मैंने example दिया. All right, either say cultural, civilizational, intellectual ties, which is what the MEA also does if you read official documents, or if you are history buff, or if you have a flair for writing, then bring in historical examples. But do you remember your limits? Your limit is right here. This is your limit. All right. So that basically also tells you कि क्या करना है. 150 word में इतना adventure possible नहीं है ना? यही UPSC examination की difficulty है. कुछ और कहना चाहते हैं? हाँ, आप कर सकते हैं तो आप करिएगा बिल्कुल. मेरे अंदर इतना टैलेंट नहीं है. मैंने अपनी लिमिटेशन बता दी, आपकी भी लिमिटेशन बता दी. आप जो कह रहे हैं वो बड़ा प्रोजेक्ट हो जाता है ना. और आप एज्यूम कर रहे हैं कि यूपीएससी क्या सोच रहा है ये आपको पता है. यू डोंट डबल गेस द यूपीएससी. यू सिंपली अंडरस्टैंड देयर आर रूल्स ऑफ रीडिंग एंड राइटिंग. कोई भी पेपर बना रहा होगा उसको पढ़ना लिखना आता होगा, है ना. ये हमारे दिमाग में होता है कि कुछ विशेष है और उसी में चला जाता है पहला 10 मिनट सोचने में. ऑल राइट, वेयर बाई योर लिमिट्स आर वेरी क्लियर. और कितने नंबर के लिए आप चाहे आप जो भी करना चाहें आपको 10 में 10 मिल जाएगा? नहीं. तो इसको कहते हैं फंक्शनली अंडरस्टैंडिंग द एग्जामिनेशन, राइट, गोइंग फॉरवर्ड. आई डोंट हैव अ डिसएग्रीमेंट विद यू, आई जस्ट डोंट सी हाउ वी वुड बी डूइंग इट अपार्ट फ्रॉम जस्ट मेंशनिंग इट एज फार एज पॉसिबल, कि एक लंबी हिस्ट्री का भी वो दे दिया और एक आगे बढ़ गए, फंक्शनली आगे बढ़ गए, दोनों के साथ जस्टिस की. समझ में आ रही है आपको बात ये? चलिए, तो इंटेलेक्चुअल कोई लड़ाई नहीं है मेरी और आपकी, बस इतना है कि मुझे अपनी लिमिट समझ में आती है और एग्जामिनेशन आपको अपनी लिमिट याद दिलाती है. ऑलराइट, हो तो कुछ भी सकता है ना, बट एग्जाम में जब बैठोगे तो क्या होगा मैं वो बता रहा हूँ. सिंपल फ्रेमवर्क नहीं रखेंगे अपने दिमाग में तो स्पेशल आंसर तो 1-2 क्वेश्चन का लिख दोगे, लेकिन लिखने हैं 20 क्वेश्चन. और एक बड़ी प्रॉब्लम आती है स्टूडेंट्स को, वो क्या होती है, मैं पेपर पूरा नहीं कर पाया. तो सारी चीज़ों को मिलाना है ना हमको. हाँ चलिए, डू यू थिंक, तो ये क्वेश्चन आपको आंसर करना है. बहुत सिंपल. क्या कोई कोट याद है आपको? वर यू रीडिंग न्यूज़पेपर? व्हाई वाज दिस क्वेश्चन आस्क्ड इन द फर्स्ट प्लेस, राइट? So this question was asked because 2022 is the year of the summit of BIMSTEC, where the charter of BIMSTEC was adopted, where the sectors of cooperation, which earlier were 14, was reduced to 7, and thereby it is that particular stage of this organization in history where now we think that it would become more active. There is a कॉन्टेक्स्ट. ठीक है, तो इसका भी आंसर बहुत सिंपल सा होना चाहिए, आप अपने दिमाग में सिंपल, क्योंकि ये क्वेश्चन आपको सीधे सीधे स्ट्रक्चर दे रहा है. पहला पार्ट इसको एड्रेस करना है, दूसरा पार्ट इसको एड्रेस करना है, तीसरा पार्ट इसको एड्रेस करना है. कितने में करना है? 10 मार्क्स में. ऑल राइट, सो फर्स्ट introduction can be very simple. You can start by, because the question is centering around BIMSTEC. Is BIMSTEC, right? So what is BIMSTEC? So in these kinds of questions, the simple strategy is simply start by saying that BIMSTEC is a regional organization comprising countries of Bay of Bengal littoral and adjacent, or Bay of Bengal littoral and adjacent countries, which is how the organization defines itself. All right, and you know the membership. If you don't have anything better to write, then write all the members who are there, which are there. All right, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Myanmar, right? So that's your starting point. You can simply start with that, and then you can make a transition within the introduction by saying that BIMSTEC has acquired greater focus in recent years, especially in view of the limitations at SAARC. All right, the limitations of SAARC. ठीक है, right? Closely looking at them, these are the following differences which can be observed, similarities or differences which can be observed. So obviously similarities is first, so you will first talk about similarities, right? It's not a hard and fast rule, but you have to do justice with to these terms. अब इनको आप तोड़ेंगे कि यहाँ पे क्या बताना है. ये जो inverted comma में sentence है, इसको तोड़ने की बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत नहीं है. It always is used in the context to define the context. So then you can have a very simple understanding, right? Similarities. What are the similarities? Right? Both of them are organizations dedicated to promoting regional cooperation. All right? Both of them are organizations dedicated to promoting regional cooperation. The simple point can be there. It has a complex concept behind it, right? Which can be stated in the second point. Both of them represent regionalization of global politics. इसका मतलब बहुत simple है. Earlier cooperation was envisaged in the form of larger multilateral organization at the global level, right? Like United Nations. Later on, countries commonsensically understood that cooperation in the immediate vicinity is also important. So that's why you will see regional organizations are created late 1970s, 1980s, barring the exception of European Union. All right. So that is there. Both of them represent regionalization of global politics. That's the intent. Both of them have overlapping membership. All right. Now remember, similar और same में अंतर होता है. All right. Similar और same में अंतर होता है. So that's why overlapping membership का एक point होगा कि membership अगर देखें तो overlapping है. Right. Difference ये है, in SAARC you have Afghanistan and Maldives, right? And they are replaced by Thailand and Myanmar in BIMSTEC, but overlapping membership, right? Third is both of the organizations as part of their agenda focus on economic and development cooperation. All right, economic and development cooperation, right? If you look at the agenda or regional program of action of SAARC, or if you look at the sectors of BIMSTEC, you will find that one of the common point is that there is focus on development. Remember, why are we saying this? Because none of these countries are developed countries. So obviously the focus would be on development, right? So that's why we can make this point. That's why syllabus is coming here to your understanding, for your understanding. All right. So this is something that we can point out as similarity. 3 similarities would be fine because it is a 10 marker. You now have to go to differences also, right? And here what you can say is that while SAARC is largely based on its conception of a region centered around South Asia, all right, which is largely a continental region. For BIMSTEC, the idea of region comprises, as the name suggests, Bay of Bengal, littoral and adjacent. All right. So that's basically the other way in which you can differentiate, start differentiating, right? That where is their primary focus? If you see, most of these South Asian countries in SAARC are countries on the land, including some landlocked countries like Afghanistan or like Bhutan or Nepal. 2 of them are island countries, right? India has a large coastline, but then India is only one member of SAARC, right? So you can also bring geography into play, how they define a region. All right, BIMSTEC clearly is defining the region in terms of Bay of Bengal, littoral and adjacent. नाम में ही लिखा हुआ है, ये commonsensical है, right? What are the differences there? So you can say that while SAARC is relevant within India's neighborhood first approach, the relevance of BIMSTEC goes beyond this particular policy approach because it caters to India's interest in Act East, but also Sagar, security and growth for all, which is India's policy towards the oceans, right? And the evolving Indo-Pacific approach. Why? Because Bay of Bengal is the bridge between, or is the transit point between Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. All right. Now, what else is the difference? The difference is in terms of their chronology. All right, the time frame within which they have existed. While SAARC dates back to 1980s, created in 1985, BIMSTEC was created in 1997. All right, BIMSTEC was created in 1997. So this is the difference, and then you can see in terms of specific focus. While BIMSTEC has adopted a sector-based approach for promoting cooperation, so in the case of SAARC, that is not the case. SAARC only has a regional program of action with different issues identified. In BIMSTEC, you have sectors. Every sector is led by a member. All right. Now there are 7 sectors. Every sector is led by 1 member. ठीक है? Now, can you tell me which sector India leads in BIMSTEC? मैं सुन लिया, आपकी बात सुन ली मैंने. Marine. India leads what is called the security sector, which has these parts: transnational terrorism, transnational crime, right, and maritime security, right? So these are parts of areas where India would lead the meetings, ड्राफ्टिंग ऑफ द डॉक्यूमेंट ऐसा करेगा इंडिया. तो इसी तरह से अलग अलग देश लीड कर रहा है एक एक सेक्टर को. दे विल लीड द मीटिंग्स. ऑल राइट. सो इन अ सेंस दे वुड प्रोवाइड कंटिन्यूटी टू द जॉब. अरिस्टोटल सेड everyone's responsibility is no one's responsibility. So in that sense, BIMSTEC brings in greater responsibility, right? You lead this sector, you lead the initiatives, right? That's basically another difference. So you can, in this sense, think of differences, but there is no harm in those differences being commonsensical based on your reading, because the examination is not about you making foreign policy. All right. So don't write the examination already by becoming an IAS, that I am an IAS, I am passing orders. All right. Or I am the Foreign Secretary of India, or more than that, Foreign Minister of India, I am making foreign policy. That's one of the fallacy with reading IR for the examination. We often start thinking that we are the makers of foreign policy of India, which we are not. That is not our task. Our task is simply to read and then convey it in the context of the examination. So difference, दो part आपने बना लिए. अब तीसरा, how are Indian foreign policy objectives realized by forming this new organization? Here comes the concept of national interest. So the primary goal of any foreign policy is to state and to pursue national interest. Now, national interest is a very vague term. It may mean thousands of things for thousands of people. But broadly, it is catering to certain vital interests of a country. And these are security, prosperity, which is economy, and status, which is your identity. Are you recognized as a leader? All right. So then, once you have this jargon in mind, you can Indian foreign policy objectives realized by forming this new organization. Number one, India realizes, and it is in its interest, that there should be regional cooperation and regional integration. All right. For some people, the idea of regional integration is Akhand Bharat. For others who are studying regionalization of global politics, they say sooner or later countries would realize that in cooperating with each other, they have better benefits. All right. You have the choice to look at it. So India wants regional integration and regional cooperation. So BIMSTEC serves this purpose of India. All right, regional integration and regional cooperation. Right. Second, if you say share borders with countries, maritime or land-based border, there are certain issues which are of concern, which are of importance, like security. So members of BIMSTEC are India's neighbors sharing land as well as maritime boundaries with it. So deliberations within BIMSTEC are relevant for India to secure its coastal security, its maritime security, and also cross-border security related issues. Like, for example, if you are looking at today Manipur shares a border with Myanmar. If you go into the debate, you will find different strands of debate are also pointing out to external factors. All right. I'm not saying which is right, which is wrong. I'm simply saying just observe. Right. So this is what we are saying. Right. So this serves the purpose of helping India better prepare for safeguarding coastal, maritime as well as its land-based border securities or cross-border issues. If not anything, security बहुत narrowly समझ लेते हैं हम लोग. Right. So that's why when India is focusing as part of BIMSTEC as lead of the security sector on transnational crimes, so you must understand that Laos, Thailand and Myanmar are called the golden triangle in the drug trafficking circuits. And societies in Northeast, apart from conflict, there is another problem that they are facing, and that is drug addiction issue. All right. So security का मतलब केवल military tank police नहीं होता है. Security is a broader term. All right. Broader term. Defense is a narrower term. All right. So that's basically what we are saying, that management of drug trafficking, human trafficking, all right, transnational crimes are also held by it. What else is India's objective? India's objective is to ensure economic development, but which part of India is most relevant in this context? It is obviously India's northeast. It's a landlocked region, the terrain is difficult, and the region has its own socio-economic problems, development problems. So membership of BIMSTEC also is helpful, relevant for ensuring this objective, development of north-east, right? If you have some knowledge of India's map, right? So that is there. Now, if you see the countries of BIMSTEC, we can use another term. These days, the term connectivity has become important, all right? At least in many of the publications, you will hear about it. But this has been important for earlier also. One of the reasons why SAARC was limited is lack of connectivity between countries. So BIMSTEC also advances India's objectives in terms of connectivity, right? If not anything, one, we are contiguous geography, so it is always possible to travel from Delhi to Kolkata to Silchar, right, to Tripura, Mizoram, Bangladesh, right? And the example is Kaladan multimodal project, all right? And the example is जिसका पीटी में क्वेश्चन भी पूछा, दोनों का पूछा, कालादान मल्टीमोडल प्रोजेक्ट और उसके साथ द IMT, इंडिया म्यांमार थाईलैंड हाईवे. If not anything, you are reading newspaper, the Prime Minister in his speech said, called upon the countries of BIMSTEC to make this region a bridge of connectivity, security and prosperity. All right, so this is the jargon that you remember. So the objective of connectivity is also upheld, right? We have already mentioned neighborhood first, act east earlier. If not, if you have not done that, you can do it here, right? But we can still make a similar point, even if we have used act east, etc. earlier. We can say that as India's interests expand towards the east in the era of Indo-Pacific, BIMSTEC can play an important role of a bridge. All right, so BIMSTEC can act as a bridge between whom? Between Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. मैं बहुत बड़ी ज्योग्राफी की बात कर रहा हूँ, साउथ ईस्ट एशिया तो है ही, एक्ट ईस्ट इसलिए कर लिया. ऑल राइट, इसी तरह से अगर आपको पता है, इट वुड बेनिफिट इंडिया आसियान ट्रेड एटसेट्रा. ऑल राइट, तो ये है. अब आप डिफरेंस और इसमें सारी बातें एग्जॉस्ट ना कर दें, थोड़ा सा बचा ले, करें ट्रांजिशन टुवर्ड्स द conclusion, whereby you simply say that BIMSTEC to achieve its potential needs to act fast. All right. For example, the proposed BIMSTEC FTA remains at the negotiation stage. For BIMSTEC to be beneficial for India's objective, the BIMSTEC itself needs to make progress, right? So what were the problems with the BIMSTEC? It had existed since 1997, meaning it has completed 25 years. That's why the question, all right? But its secretariat came up in 2014, which means it lacked institutionalization, unlike SAARC. So that is another point of difference. SAARC has better institutionalization. Better institutions have been created there, right? It lacked institutionalization. Second, its leading countries, India and Thailand, created BIMSTEC, but their focus was for India SAARC and for Thailand ASEAN. So what BIMSTEC needs? Greater focus. All right. And the secretariat of BIMSTEC, even if it came into existence in 2014 in Dhaka, still requires help. So that's why India announced $1 million of support for the capacity building of BIMSTEC secretariat. So conclude by either pointing out what needs to be done and ideally also indicate what India is already doing in this particular context, right? So there is no dearth of content. So you can always keep on saying कि ये भी कर सकते हैं क्या, ये भी कर सकते हैं क्या. My answer would be very simple. If you think it is reasonable, if you are sure of it, please do it. But please also remember the limit. So it is not about the content only that I am speaking. It is also about the process that you need to follow. Let's go to this question. How will I2U2, India, Israel, UAE, USA grouping transform India's position in global politics? All right. Again, a simply framed question. How will? It is pointing to the future. Why is it pointing to the future? Because you cannot have a deeper analysis about any initiative which is very new. 6 महीने में 1 साल में आप बहुत ज़्यादा deep analysis नहीं करते किसी चीज़ की. It has only been proposed. All right, it has only started developing now, I2U2. So that's why how will it transform? So again, the answer comes from what do you think are India's interests? And for what kind of interests will a grouping like I2U2 be beneficial, right? So how will I2U2 grouping transform India's position in global politics? And global politics is a very big term. It's like a seed, right? Seed is small, but if you sow it, it will grow into a large tree. So do you see that potential, or are you only stuck on the surface level? कि क्या हुआ, क्या मतलब हुआ, right? So that's why second point or third point of the syllabus comes into picture. All right, bilateral, regional, global groupings involving India. All right, समझ में आ रही है आपको? So it is one of the groupings where India has got involved, right? Secondly, you develop certain understanding or awareness of what kind of phrases, jargons are used in the context of India's foreign policy. So multi-alignment, multipolarity, meaning India does not want a world dominated by even a friend. All right, so some people believe that foreign policy is this: oppose China, become friends with US. This is not foreign policy. All right, so that's why एक बहुत ही घिसी पिटी कहावत है जो हर कोई बोलता रहता है, पर बोलना जरूरी एक कॉन्टेक्स्ट में ही है, that there are no permanent friends or enemies in international relations, there are only permanent interests. All right, so if you understand the term from the syllabus, what is it talking about, right, your job would become easier, right? So again, introduction to this question, 15 marker, you can go in detail. You can simply say that the I2U2 started as an interaction between the foreign ministers of the 4 countries in 2021 and has now moved towards the summit, because if you are reading, the summit of I2U2 took place in 2022, all right, and the meeting had started simply as meeting of foreign ministers in 2021, all right. So that can be your introduction. You are contextualizing, you have given the context. यहाँ आप define नहीं कर सकते, है ना? I2U2 क्या है? In simple terms, I2U2 is a dialogue platform. I2U2 क्या है? In simple terms, I2U2 is a mini-lateral. So that's where your understanding of the terms bilateral, when 2 countries are involved in any endeavor, dialogue or any kind of action. Multilateral, 3 or more countries, all right, 3 or more countries involved in any endeavor, all right, dialogue, agreements, etc. But generally, multilateral has come to mean larger organizations like UN, 193 members, like WTO, 164 members, all right. So that's where an iteration of multilateral, but a smaller form, is called mini-lateral, all right, where the participation is limited, right, less than 10, let's say, mini-lateral, 2, 3. So that's why you will find trilateral. That's why some people called Quad as, some people called I2U2 as West Asian Quad, all right. These are all jargons. They are simply saying that 4 members are there, right, but broadly it will fall under multilateral kind of cooperation or interaction, right. So that's the starting point. It started in 2021, now it has moved towards a summit, meaning it is moving towards consolidation, right. So thereby the answer would be A. What understanding do you have of India's interest in West Asia, regional, all right? What understanding you have of India's relations with US, global? US is a globally relevant power. And what understanding do you have of India's relations with Israel or UAE? UAE is among India's largest trading partners. We signed a free trade agreement with it recently. Israel, traditionally known only in the context of defense supplies, but also wider agricultural partnership. We are negotiating a free trade agreement with it, and it is important from the perspective of technology. So you can construct the answer through common sense also. Many times UPSC would push you कि रट के आने का कोई फायदा नहीं है, राइट, और मतलब निकालने का कोई फायदा नहीं कि आप फॉरेन पॉलिसी नहीं बना रहे हैं. उस समय जो रीजनेबली समझ में आ रहा है, रीजनेबली का मतलब है ये समझें कि आप फॉरेन मिनिस्टर नहीं है, यू आर ओनली अ स्टूडेंट एंड यू हैव बीन टास्क्ड टू स्टडी. तो आपने पढ़ाई की हो तो आंसर तो आ जाएगा आपको, right? So then transform India's position in global politics. Divide it into bilateral, regional, global. All right? 3 तरीके से आप कह सकते हैं. पहला, as part of India's approach to diversify its foreign policy, it adds a layer to its bilateral relations with the involved countries. All right? अब केवल बायलैटरल बातें नहीं है, बल्कि हम एक ब्रॉडर लेवल पे. सो बेसिकली दिस इज अ डिप्लोमैटिक पॉलिटिकल पॉइंट, राइट, दैट इट इज एन एडिशन टू द ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्टिंग बायलैटरल engagements between India and involved countries. So it simply means that it can be seen as a way of strengthening relations with them, right? All of these countries are pivotal countries. Second, regional, bring it to West Asia. This agreement was possible. This kind of cooperation was possible only after certain things changed in West Asia, right? Unless UAE and Israel had normalized their relations, it would not have been possible. Israel and UAE normalized their relations in 2020, right? So it may enable India to, taking advantage of its friendly relations, to expand the ambit of the Abraham Agreement by bringing in other countries. So what is the possibility? India can play a constructive role in building peace and building stability in West Asia, which is a vital region for us. All right. This is something that the Israeli ambassador have also said, whose interview was published in the Hindu also. All right, that India can do this. So हम कहते रहते हैं ना, हमको बनना है विश्वगुरु, हमको ये बनना है, हमको वो बनना है, तो हमको ये करना पड़ेगा. We would have to play this role. So in a way, potentially, germinally, this possibility is there, right? Third is certain issues. Now bring in issues. What kind of issues IT/U2 can be important in? So if you look at these countries, two areas clearly come to mind. One is technology, another is energy. All right. So the IT/U2 involving leading countries in terms of technology and leading countries in terms of energy can play an important role in shaping the solutions for climate change. All right, because climate change is intrinsically related with how do we change our energy consumption. All right, UAE is a leading country in terms of renewable energy also, and its investments have been futuristic. Israel is known for innovations to survive in otherwise hostile environmental condition, right? It's part of the arid region. And US holds keys to cutting edge technology development. So because of technology, they can contribute to solutions for climate change. All right. So thereby, if you look at India, what is India seeking? India is seeking finance and technology in order to make a just transition forward, right? Third area, if you look at the world 2022, Russia-Ukraine crisis had broken out. Russia-Ukraine crisis, in terms of its global impact, is known for pushing forward the food insecurity. All right. So agriculture is another area, right? So this initiative would enable India to benefit from as well as contribute to development of sectors like agriculture, development of sectors like food processing, right? So that is basically what it enables India to do. And then in the next part, you simply say, keeping the above in mind, it's relevant in the context of the consistent foreign policy stand of India supporting multipolar world and multilateral cooperation. अब आप UN reform भी ला सकते हैं, तमाम चीज़ें भी ला सकते हैं, but IT/U2 का focus बड़ा simple सा है. All right, regional stability in West Asia, cooperation between these countries, main focus on technology, main focus on trade and economic activities, main focus on food security, agriculture. All right, investments, for example, in food processing, paper 3 is what India is seeking. All right, and investment from UAE in one of the areas where we see the potential is food processing. All right, तो ये IT/U2 का वो पर्पस था, पर आप दुनिया की लड़ाई करने लगते हैं ना कि ये इसको जवाब देने में मदद करेगा, ये उसको जवाब देने में मदद करेगा, ये ऐसा हो जाएगा. कोई आपके लिए कुछ फ्री में नहीं करता, और कोई भी चीज़ शुरुआत होने के बाद ये नहीं हम कह सकते कि आगे जाके ऐसा हो जाएगा, ऐसा मिल जाएगा. तो हमको ब्रेक करना पड़ेगा. So we talked about political diplomatic, we talked about bilateral regional global aspect of it, we talked about technology, we talked about energy, and thereby you can also bring in another factor. All these countries are richer than India or poorer than India? Richer than India. So you can bring in the jargons like it would enable India to forge partnerships for North-South cooperation. All right, and it is an example of North-South cooperation, because the countries like United States are countries of the North, countries like India are countries of South. All right, so North-South cooperation, right? And North-South cooperation, South-South cooperation are important for development, sustainable development goals, for climate-related goals. All right, अगर आप समझें कि दुनिया में क्या-क्या मेजर समस्याएं हैं, और अगर आप ये समझें कि one of India's national interests is ensuring its status as a solution provider, all right, as a consensus maker, right, as a country which supports multilateralism as a way of providing solutions to challenges. हम अकेले नहीं कर सकते, मिलके करना पड़ेगा. And multipolarity as a way of global stability. The world cannot be stable when it is dominated by one power or two power, but world is stable when powers and capabilities are sufficiently diffused, distributed across major countries, right? So in my view, that could have been the answer. In this realm, now you can, your fantastic job would be, बहुत सारे लोगों को टेक्नोलॉजी बहुत पता होता है, बहुत सारे लोगों को डिफेंस बहुत पता होता है, राइट? आफ्टर मेकिंग दिस सिंपल स्ट्रक्चर, ब्रिंग इन योर स्पेशलिटी. आपकी स्पेशलिटी क्या है, उसके बाद आपको वो लाना है. यस, क्या कह रहे हैं आप? टू काउंटर चाइना. देखो, इंडियाज फॉरेन पॉलिसी कैन नॉट बी सिंपली नैरोड डाउन टू काउंटरिंग कंट्री ए और कंट्री बी, बट द सेकेंड वर्ड दैट यू मेंशन, BRI. So of course, it is one way of India expanding its ambit of influence, right? Which China is also doing. China is going with BRI to globe, right? If you see, India, UAE are also partnering for connectivity. First in India, but also there is an idea called +1 kind of cooperation. All right, India, UAE in other countries. So I2U2 countries also. So that's why I brought in developing. So if you look at connectivity, or if you look at BRI, it's only an example of connectivity infrastructure financing project proposed by China, which is liked by certain countries, which is not liked by other countries. But ultimately, what is the context? The globe, especially the developing countries, least developed countries, require financing for infrastructure projects, which is missing. So this can also be there, but has it been declared by I2U2? That is the question. All right, बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं. BRI को अगर आप broadly देखें, catering to an issue which is relevant for the developing world, all right, which is infrastructure and connectivity. बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं, ठीक है. Yes, that's where you make transition. All right, that's where you make transition before the conclusion कि ये तो है, उसी चीज पे मैं आ रहा हूँ. ये आप ये सारी चीजें गिना दें, है ना. सबसे ज्यादा कंफ्यूजन इसी चीज पता कि क्या कर रहा है I2U2. तो पहले तो आप जाने I2U2 क्या कर रहा है. अब अगर इसको सक्सेसफुल होना है तो उन्हीं पॉइंट से रिलेटेड जो पॉइंट हमने मेंशन किया उनमें से कुछ पॉइंट्स को एड्रेस करना शुरू करते हैं. ऑल राइट, दैट इफ I2U2 और द अब्राहम अकॉर्ड simply, or if the Abraham Accord situation in West Asia simply moves towards another form of polarization, which is Iran versus others, I2U2 would be limited. All right, Abraham Accords normalize relations between Israel and the Arab countries. Fair and good. If they can build peace, they can trade more, they can diplomatically interact more. But they also have a common enemy in Iran. So if that kind of polarization happens, then I2U2 would become limited, because India would not like to be part of that. Second, it creates a perception issue, entanglement issue, right? That you are siding with one kind of country, Israel, UAE, right? So we are simply saying that the future of I2U2 depends on broader peace in West Asia, which can only be brought in by not only normalization between Israel and Arab states, but also Iran. All right, so that's basically our red flag कि ये कैसे जाता है. I2U2 नहीं, I2U2 जिस चीज ने पॉसिबल किया, अब्राहम अकॉर्ड्स. ऑल राइट, सेकेंड ऑफ कोर्स इज, फर्स्ट इज अ कॉशन कि ये पोलराइजेशन अगर होता है तो परसेप्शन इशू होगा, दैट वुड बी इशू ऑफ चॉइसेस. सेकेंड इज अ सजेशन, राइट. Improvement of bilateral relations with each of these countries would further strengthen the efficacy of I2U2. So for example, UAE के साथ free trade agreement कर लिया, Israel के साथ हम free trade agreement negotiate कर रहे हैं, US के साथ possible नहीं है, so don't suggest. All right, कई लोग ये भी suggest कर देंगे कि US के साथ होना चाहिए, US के साथ possible नहीं है, US is not entertaining that, but you know that with Israel we are negotiating. So that's basically suggesting forward that conclusion of free trade agreement as we have done with UAE with Israel would further add to this. Simple point is, improvement in bilateral relations would further strengthen the potential of I2U2. 2। इसीलिए अननेसेसरीली चाइना को आने की जरूरत नहीं है, हम चाइना से हर जगह लड़ाई नहीं लड़ रहे, राइट? इक्वेशन इज वेरी सिंपल. China is a problem because it is at our border. All right, our fight with China is not like the US fight with China, and we should not make it so as well, right? If you understand foreign policy, it would become clearer, right? Now the last question, clean energy is the order of the day. Again inverted comma. अब आप कहेंगे कुछ तो करना पड़ेगा इसके साथ, मैं कहूँगा it is only providing a context, right? Okay. Question क्या है? Describe, notice the keyword, describe, awareness based question, describe. ऑलराइट, केवल डिस्क्रिप्शन देना है और बहुत ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं करना है, मतलब बहुत एग्जाम्पल, टर्म्स, जार्गन्स, कीवर्ड्स यूज कर रहे हैं इसमें. सेकेंडली, द एबिलिटी टू आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन would be better if you have a clear understanding of what India's domestic policy preference and evolution has been when it comes to climate change. ऑलराइट, ये लोगों को मुश्किल लगा था क्वेश्चन जब ये आया था, क्योंकि इस तरह के क्वेश्चन का प्रेसिडेंस नहीं था इशू बेस्ड, राइट? लोगों को लगा कि लेकिन वेस्ट एशिया एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी क्वेश्चन यूपीएससी ने पूछा है, उससे पहले यूपीएससी ने पूछा है इंडियाज इमेज एज द लीडर ऑफ डेवलपिंग वर्ल्ड. दीज आर इशू बेस्ड क्वेश्चन. वो एग्जाम्पल हमारे पास ऑलरेडी हैं, एंड ब्रॉडली दैट्स वाई डेवलपमेंट, डेवलपिंग, ये जो टर्म है ना आपके सिलेबस में, दे आर ऑलवेज प्रिपेयरिंग यू फॉर इशू बेस्ड क्वेश्चन. बिकॉज ट्रेड में जब निगोशिएशन हो रहा है, इश्यूज हैं WTO के लेवल पे, इश्यूज प्ले आउट एट द लेवल ऑफ डेवलप्ड एंड डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज. Climate change, when negotiations are taking place, of course it's a global problem, but then developed countries have a view, developing countries have a view based on their need, based on their national interest, and there is also a third category which generally we tend to ignore: small island developing states, most acutely vulnerable to climate change, right? It's a complicated issue, so at least just as you do in ethics paper, you should be able to identify the stakeholders. किन की बात हो रही है? All right, who are involved, and thereby once you understand what is their primary position, all right, developing देश क्या चाहते हैं? For example, India, what does India want? Developed countries, what do they want? US, European Union, all right, and what is it that the small island developing states want, right? So once you have this broader understanding, newspaper reading ऐसा नहीं होगा कि अलग अलग हो जाएगा, आपको हर आर्टिकल में नजर आने लगेगा कि ये इस आर्टिकल का ये पॉइंट पेपर 1 में काम आएगा, इस आर्टिकल का ये पॉइंट पेपर 2 में काम आएगा, इस आर्टिकल का ये पॉइंट पेपर 3 में काम आएगा या एथिक्स में काम आएगा. ऑलराइट, सो दिस क्वेश्चन वाज देयर. एनी आइडिया व्हाई दिस क्वेश्चन शुड हैव कम? हाथ उठाइए, अब बता दीजिए. नहीं तो 2022 में क्यों पूछेंगे? 92 का पेपर तो डिस्कस कर नहीं रहा. 30 साल बाद आप UNFCC हुआ था, UNFCCC हुआ था 1992 में. चलिए, इंडिया हैड सबमिटेड इट्स रिवाइज्ड NDCs टू द UN, रिवाइज्ड नेशनली डिटरमिन्ड कंट्रीब्यूशन. इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूं ना कि दुनिया भर की सारी चीजें पता होती हैं हमें, पर सिंपली व्हाट इंडिया इज डूइंग हमको नहीं पता होता. ऑलराइट, हमको लगता है कि IR तो पता नहीं किस चीज के बारे में है, क्योंकि लोग इस तरह से बात करते हैं. बट अल्टीमेटली दिस इज एन एग्जामिनेशन फॉर सिविल सर्विस इन इंडिया, पब्लिक पॉलिसी, राइट, एंड द सब्जेक्ट्स आर ऑल्सो रिलेटेड विथ पब्लिक पॉलिसी मेकिंग. इतना अवेयरनेस होना चाहिए आपको. तो अवेयरनेस बेसिस होता है किसी भी क्वेश्चन का. पहला स्टेप होता है अवेयरनेस, आर यू अवेयर. दूसरा स्टेप होता है अंडरस्टैंडिंग. सो इंडिया हैड सबमिटेड इट्स रिवाइज्ड NDCs, राइट, nationally determined contributions, right, as part of its commitment to contribute to the global efforts towards, अब टर्म आएंगे, adaptation and mitigation. all right, ये आपको समझ में आ गया? तो आप हमेशा इस तरह के क्वेश्चन का अगर आपको ये पता है तो शुरुआत कर सकते हैं डिस्क्राइब करने से पहले. दैट रिसेंटली इंडिया submitted its revised NDCs with expanded responsibility to the United Nations, right, as a way of conveying its steps to combat climate change, its contributions to combat climate change. तो very simple story. अब इसको भी तैयारी करने में अगर आप एक एक करके तैयारी करेंगे तो आपकी तैयारी थोड़ा मुश्किल हो जाएगी, पर अगर आप देख पाए, हाँ, डेवलपमेंट एंड इन्वायरमेंट आर टू इश्यूज विच आर juxtaposed, all right, kept side by side. Some people have a view that they have an opposing relationship, all right, that development would mean harm to environment. Some people would be more devoted towards one word, development, rather than environment, all right. जब आपको लगता है कि ये ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है, ये ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है, but public policy would always be interested in balancing this, all right. So there are no best solutions that you can provide. There are only good or bad trade-offs, all right. और इंटरनेशनल रिलेशन थ्योरी में हम इसको इन सारी चीज़ों को पढ़ते हैं, गेम थ्योरी, नेगोशिएशन, और हम जानते हैं कि परफेक्ट सॉल्यूशन नहीं मिलने वाला, all right, because human beings in general don't believe in perfect solution. Human beings believe I am right, मेरा होना चाहिए, और when nations deal with global issues, global commons issues, वो भी उनका भी यही अप्रोच होके आता है. So trade-offs, all right, it is about trade-offs. क्या मैं क्या करूंगा ये डिपेंड करता है इस बात पे कि आप क्या करेंगे, ऑल राइट. समझ में आ रही है आपको बात? ठीक है. तो डेवलपमेंट और इन्वायरमेंट और इकोनॉमी का डिबेट चलता रहता है. डोमेस्टिकली भी आप देखेंगे, है ना, आप पढ़ेंगे कि क्या करना चाहिए, इन्वायरमेंट इम्पैक्ट असेसमेंट करना चाहिए. अभी एक डिबेट चल रहा है कि कोल, एक बड़ा कोल माइन, कोल इंडिया एक्सपैंड करना चाहता है, विच वुड मेक दैट साइट बिगेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर ऑफ फॉसिल फ्यूल इन द वर्ल्ड, ऑल राइट. लोकल्स आर अपोजिंग, नेगोशिएशन चल रहे हैं. ये सारी चीज़ें देखेंगे तो आपको डेवलपमेंट और इन्वायरमेंट का रिलेशन समझ में आने लगेगा. पोजीशन क्या लेनी है वो आपके ऊपर है, ऑल राइट. बट द मोमेंट यू टेक एक्सट्रीम पोजीशन यू सिंपली शो लैक ऑफ एजुकेशन, ऑल राइट. एज आई सेड, द परफेक्ट सॉल्यूशंस आर नॉट पॉसिबल. देयर इज अ गुड ट्रेड ऑफ और अ बैड ट्रेड ऑफ, ऑल राइट. So that's why identifying the stakeholders again is important. Now the journey in international relations, how environment came into international relations is very clear when you are preparing for environment ecology also. For example, when you are reading that simple source, the NCERT class 12, the last few chapters, you get an idea, right? Earlier we human beings are thinking that हम ही हैं जो हैं. इंडस्ट्रियल रिवोल्यूशन, अब घोड़े पे सवार होके पता नहीं कहाँ चले जाएंगे विकास करके, रहना तो इसी धरती पे. तो शुरुआत में तो चले गए, जाते गए, बाद में एहसास हुआ कि कुछ ज़्यादा ही विकास हो गया है, और अगर ऐसा ही होता रहा तो धरती रहने लायक नहीं रह जाएगी, राइट. सो एनवायरमेंटल अवेयरनेस केम लेट, राइट. इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट एटसेट्रा वाज प्रायोरिटी. So we basically trace it back to certain developments, right? Developments in Western society, developments in our society, but main culprits are the Western societies. So there you will see scholarly work, right? You all know Russell Carson's work called The Silent Springs, right? So these kinds of scholarly work, that's one example, which is bringing in the economic importance of ecology, all right? And also the need to protect ecology, and also how human activities affect ecology, right? So how we in certain sense have been the keystone species which is hell-bent on destroying the ecology itself. Then you have Malthus, all right. Malthus had basically talked about how food production is not going to keep up with growth in human population, all right. All these things we start getting to know. Interdisciplinary studies, all right. Carrying capacity, right. Ecological services, आपको सबको पता है, तो वो हमेशा से ये awareness नहीं था. Then apart from these scholarly works, you have legislative changes in countries like United States, right. Laws against pollution, etc. Then you have the Stockholm Conference, all right. Human Environment Conference, स्टॉकहोम. अभी 70s में आप देखेंगे और क्या होता है. इंडिया हैज इट्स ओन वाइल्ड लाइफ प्रोटेक्शन लॉज, पॉल्यूशन रिलेटेड लॉज कमिंग अप इन दिस पीरियड, ऑल राइट. देन व्हाट डू यू सी इन द 1980s? यू हैव चेरनोबिल. चेरनोबिल इज अ न्यूक्लियर एक्सीडेंट एंड वी आर ऑल अफ्रेड ऑफ न्यूक्लियर विंटर. इतने सारे जो बम रख रखे हमने, चले तो कभी नहीं हिरोशिमा नागासाकी के बाद, लेकिन चल गए. So it would cause nuclear winter, all right. So that also creates awareness that certain kind of development activities can have high cost. What to do? क्या करना चाहिए? Then you will see the Brundtland Commission report. All right, the Brundtland Commission report, which is bringing in the concerns of development and environment together in a balanced equation. All right, one earth, one family, these kinds of ideas, right? Sustainable development, फिर idea आता है. 1987, you have the creation of IPCC, all right, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, whose reports you should definitely look at, right? That is one good source of data. जब भी बात करना होगा इस तरह के इशू के साथ. 1992, you have the Rio Conference, all right, but for the first time, global leaders of civil society, it was a very large gathering, come. And what is the achievement? For the first time, we acknowledge that human activities, anthropogenic activities, are responsible for increasing the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which is leading to greenhouse effect, which is leading to sea surface rise, global temperature rise. And if it is not stopped, then human civilization as we know it would become impossible in a small time frame. So one was acknowledgement that it is a problem, it is an issue, and second was we need to do something. That's why United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, all right, Convention on Biodiversity, etc. बहुत सारी चीजें आई. UNFCCC broadly principles की बात कर रहा है कि ये जरूरी है एक्शन लेना. एक्शन आता है क्योटो प्रोटोकॉल से 1997, all right. Kyoto Protocol does what? It basically gives concrete shape to the principles of the UNFCCC. So one is about principles, another is giving it concrete shape. One of the things that we know happened through Kyoto is that Kyoto for the first time identifies countries having binding responsibility. So it binds 37 countries, right? Advanced industrialized countries as well as what it calls economies in transition to undertake binding targets for emission cuts. All right, and now when this is happening, why when global warming is a global phenomenon, some countries should take the responsibility? So therein comes again developed and developing, right? Everybody recognizes there is a problem, but the issue is who is more responsible, and second, apart from responsibility, who is more capable to respond or take on responsibility. This is called CBDR, common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities, right? So India agrees with UNFCCC and India stands with CBDR. Responsibility hai lekin sabki hai, right? So that is for the first time you see India's position on this in support of CBDR, all right, and also accepting कि भाई ये problem है. Now Kyoto comes into action in 2005. And then there is second addition to Kyoto also. And then the question is what will happen after Kyoto. So therein comes the Paris Agreement 2015. By the time Paris Agreement happens, the pressure from the West is rising. Why? Because now developing countries like India are saying, if you want us to take more responsibility, you should provide us two things, finance and technology. Now these are the two things that the West has, but West has never been too willing to share it, all right. So that's why Global Environmental Facility, Global Climate Fund, these are all coming up. 2009 Copenhagen COP, the United States joins the negotiations, all right. United States generally, if you see, has its own set of issues, all right. It is one of the largest polluters, but it has always stopped shy of taking full responsibility. But 2008 under President Obama, US joins the climate change negotiations. What happens then? Then the US, Japan, European Union, developed world, North, starts putting pressure on developing countries. That why should we take binding responsibilities? Why not you? And this is the pressure then where countries like India are putting forward the position that it is not about simple absolute responsibility. It is also about respective capabilities. So where is the finance? Where is the technology? So thereby you will see India cooperated with certain countries, basic, Brazil, South Africa, India, China. They took a common position on the issue, right? Which is that developing countries like India, etc., would take responsibility, but it will not be binding. All right, and that's where you will see the development of the idea of intended nationally determined contribution, which now is known as nationally determined contribution. All right, तो पहले तो आपको ये यात्रा बताना है कि इंडिया की पॉलिसी में ये चीज़ें मेन है. इंडिया ये नहीं कहता कि क्लाइमेट चेंज को लेकर के हमें कुछ नहीं करना. इंडिया कहता है कि क्लाइमेट एक्शन, बट एट व्हाट कॉस्ट. ऑल राइट, वहां तक पहुंच गया. अब पेरिस के बाद बहुत सारी चीजें होती है. नाउ आफ्टर पेरिस, बिफोर दैट 2008-9 itself, India had issued its first list of actions that it would take. All right, which then translates into the NDCs. So there you will see now we have taken certain ambitious steps. For example, the most famous one is reaching net zero by 2070. All right, but then intermediate steps are reducing carbon intensity of the economy, increasing the share of renewables, increasing forest cover. If you would see, these are the things that India is saying. So India is now taking more and more responsibility, right? So we can say that it disproportional to its onus and disproportional to its own capability. तो इंडिया इज विलिंग टू डू मोर. इस कहानी में तो ये बताना है आपको. हालांकि इन्वायरमेंटल साइंटिस्ट वुड से कि ये दुनिया जो है वो पेरिस इज नॉट इनफ, राइट, बिकॉज वी हैव एग्रीड टू कैप द ग्लोबल टेम्परेचर राइट बिलो 2 डिग्री. ऑल राइट, वो अपर टारगेट है 1.5 डिग्री तक हम, पर साइंटिस्ट का कहना है कि इतना काफ़ी नहीं होगा. तो वहाँ डिससेटिस्फैक्शन हो सकता है. पर क्योंकि ये फॉरेन पॉलिसी IR के सिविल सर्विस एग्जाम में आप लिख रहे हैं, तो आप इंडिया की एक्शंस की तारीफ करेंगे, ये दिखाएंगे. ठीक है, और उसके बाद आप पेरिस के बाद आएंगे. पेरिस के बाद हुए हैं ग्लासगो. ऑल राइट, सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल इंडिया स्टूड फॉर, व्हेन इन ग्लासगो पीपल वर डिस्कसिंग दी फेजिंग आउट ऑफ कार्बन, मतलब कि पेट्रोल मत खर्च करो, डीजल मत खर्च करो, कोल मत खर्च करो. तो इंडिया फिर से वही पोजीशन है इंडिया की. भाई इट इज इजी फॉर द डेवलप्ड वर्ल्ड टू से दैट, बट लुक एट आवर डेवलपमेंट नीड्स. वी कैनॉट डू दैट, राइट, वी कैनॉट phase out. So that's why the terminology that COP26 adopted was phase down. All right, reduction in the use of fossil fuels. This is also something that, again, environmental scientists से पूछो तो वो critical होंगे. Developing के terminology में देखो, so this is also something that reflects India's position, right? Not phasing out of carbon, not phasing out of fossil fuels, but phasing down of fossil fuels. All right, this is what we did, right? तो यहाँ तक आपको पहुँचाना है. और उसके बाद बहुत सारी चीज़ें आ जाएंगी इसमें, जैसे कि हमने क्या क्या किया है और लोगों के साथ, राइट? तो हमारा रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी का कमिटमेंट तो है ही, हमारे अपने टारगेट्स तो हैं. इसके साथ वी हैव कोऑपरेटेड विथ सर्टेन कंट्रीज. किन के साथ, राइट? यूरोपियन यूनियन. ऑल राइट, क्योंकि ये इंपॉर्टेंट पार्टनर्स हैं जो प्रेशर प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हैं, तो इन्हीं से बात करनी है फाइनेंस और टेक्नोलॉजी के बारे में. So that's why in clean energy, green energy partnership with European Union. More importantly is clean energy and environment partnership between India and United States, whereby US companies are investing in India. One Solar नाम की एक कंपनी है, it has recently invested in solar projects in India. और थोड़ा टेक्निकल समझो आप जाएंगे, ये जा रहा है मैकेनिज्म्स ऑफ क्योटो, जॉइंट इम्प्लीमेंटेशन क्लीन डेवलपमेंट मैकेनिज्म. और इस साल हमने अमेंड किया है अपना, कुछ अमेंड किया लास्ट ईयर, जिससे कार्बन मार्केट का क्वेश्चन आ गया. 2001 में एनर्जी कंजर्वेशन का एक लॉ लेके आए थे, वो इस बार हमने वो किया है ना. इसी के साथ है लाइफ इनिशिएटिव. ऑल राइट, लाइफस्टाइल फॉर एनवायरनमेंट. इसी के साथ है इंटरनेशनल सोलर अलायंस. ऑल राइट, इसी के साथ है थोड़ा सा इनडायरेक्ट है CDRI, राइट, कोalition फॉर डिजास्टर रिजिलियंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर. और है वन सन, वन वर्ल्ड, वन ग्रिड. तो यही सारी चीजें आपको sprinkle करनी और conclusion would be very simple that the task is still not complete. All right, there is a need to develop a global compact for adequate governance of jargon ले आते हैं global commons. One of the reasons why it is very difficult to arrive at a satisfactory compact on the governance of atmosphere. Climate change is an issue related with atmosphere. Atmosphere is one of the global commons. Others are the deep sea and the seabed, the area, all right, and outer space, right, and Antarctica. These are called global commons. These are resource domains which are, we can say, trust of civilization, trust of humanity. They are for everyone. They are beyond any sovereign control, all right, and claim. The global commons ka governance is a difficult issue. That's basically what is going into this. इसमें लिखने के लिए बहुत कुछ था, but आपको वो एक ट्रैजेक्टरी भी तो करनी है ना. इवोल्यूशन हुआ है इंडिया की पॉलिसी का, इसलिए मैंने आपको 1960 से एग्जाम्पल दिया और इंडिया के लॉज का एग्जाम्पल दिया. तो अगर इवोल्यूशन हुआ है इंडिया के पॉलिसी का, पेपर है IR का, so you should remember what global developments are there to which India is responding, all right. और अगर यही आ जाता है पेपर 3 में, so main priority would be India's own actions, all right. Is this clear? Okay. तो ये बड़ा मजेदार क्वेश्चन था, मेरे लिए बहुत मजेदार क्वेश्चन था, बिकॉज दिस वुड हैव गिवन एडवांटेज टू स्टूडेंट्स हु हैव वर्कड हार्ड एंड हु हैव डेवलप्ड द एबिलिटी टू लुक बियॉन्ड द नैरो कन्फाइनमेंट ऑफ पेपर 1, पेपर 2, पेपर 3 बाय अंडरस्टैंडिंग. नॉलेज है, नॉलेज कहीं भी काम आ सकता है, ऑल राइट. आगे चलते हैं, मैं आपको चीज़ें आपको दिखाता जाऊंगा, जैसे कोट्स एंड सब्सटेंस. मैंने कहानी आपको सुना दी. क्वेश्चन 1 अबाउट श्रीलंका, यू हैव अ जार्गन लाइक मित्रत्व मागा. All right, you can use it in the conclusion. Mitrato Maga was the title of joint statement of India and Sri Lanka in 2020 when the summit between prime ministers took place. All right, so India and Sri Lanka need to go forward in the spirit of Mitrato Maga, or India's assistance to Sri Lanka should be seen in the spirit of Mitrato Maga. Mitrato Maga, Mitrato Marg, path of friendship. All right. Then, if you are reading newspaper, Milinda Moragoda, who is the High Commissioner of Sri Lanka to India, 2020 also he had given an interview where he had talked about the roadmap for India-Sri Lanka relations. And basically what they are saying, I'm not saying you note it down, but I'm saying that if you are planning to write mains, this is what you should be focusing on, कि ये आपके काम आएगा, है ना? Sri Lanka's High Commissioner to India, Milind Moragoda, has lauded New Delhi's or praised New Delhi's support to his country, which came without condition, and the package was extremely flexible. All right, so India's help to Sri Lanka is notable because it was without conditions and it was flexible. That is what friends do, right? This is another statement that you see very clearly. India is anchor when it comes to security in this region. Sri Lanka's High Commissioner is saying that. So this is basically telling you what are the benefits of cooperating or helping others. It is not for dominance. You understand that everyone is equal when it comes to international relations. This is called sovereign equality. Nobody is your junior, all right. A country is maybe a small, but that doesn't mean that its sovereignty is of less value. So that's why your language should reflect that understanding, right? For example, never use big brother for India in the examination. Big brother has a negative connotation, all right. बहुत सारे लोग literally translate कर देते हैं कि इंडिया बड़ा भाई है, तो आपको लगा बड़ा भाई है तो आपने अंग्रेजी में लिख दिया बिग ब्रदर, बट अंग्रेजी में उस फ्रेज का मतलब थोड़ा अलग हो जाता है क्योंकि वो अलग कॉन्टेक्स्ट से आ रहा है. इट इज़ कमिंग फ्रॉम द वर्क ऑफ जॉर्ज ऑरवेल, राइट. 1984 एनिमल फार्म लिखी है उन्होंने, राइट. सो दैट्स बेसिकली व्हाट यू शुड अंडरस्टैंड वेरी क्लियरली, एंड दैट्स व्हाई यू शुड रीड न्यूज़पेपर, राइट. यू विल गेट द वर्ड. Question 2 about SAARC and BIMSTEC. This is what Foreign Minister Jaishankar had said in 2019. While SAARC has its problems, BIMSTEC has energy and possibility. All right, that India looks at BIMSTEC with energy and possibility. All right. Now, question number 3. What was this question on? I2, U2. Right. There is something that one can clearly see. India before 1992 we can clearly say that India is a developing country of the South. After 1992 economic liberalization, So we have overlapping interests which are shared. We share some of our interests with developing countries. We share some of our interests with developed countries. So that's why you will see India is a member of various clubs. 1960s, India was member of G77, which was a club of developing countries coming together for enhancing their bargaining capacity. 1992 onwards, especially in the 21st century, you have India being a member of G77, but India is also a member of G20. All right. India also is a member of BRICS. India also is a member of Quad, right? So that's where you should see that now India may be in a unique position where it can act as a bridge, and thereby you will see India would have diverse kinds of participations. You should not be confused by it. You should understand that foreign policy is such a vast business that you cannot only rely on one instrument. All right. So it is diversification of your options. So that's what this statement represents. India is now part of both the trade union and the management in global politics. All right. On some forums we sit with poorer countries, and some forums which sit with richer countries. That is the meaning of it. All right. I had read it somewhere. I can't find whom to attribute it to, and I can't say that it is my quote also, but this gives you a sense when you keep on reading, right? Dr. Jaishankar keeps on referring to new way of doing business, that I2, U2, Quad, etc. It's not necessarily for or against anyone. All right. It's basically understanding world is complex, so you will need different kinds of instruments. All right. Multipolarity, multilateralism, minilateral. These are some of the words additionally apart from the information that you had used in I2, U2 question, which could have been helpful. All right. In 2019 speech, Foreign Minister Jaishankar talked about multi-alignment, meaning simultaneously developing good relations with all the major centers. Rather than aligning with one or two, we are saying everybody is our friend. Multi-alignment, all right. Hedging is basically diversifying, cutting your losses, diversifying your options. All right. So that's why solution to China's problem is not allying with United States. That's why we don't use term alliance, we use term partnership. All right. Rather, it is engage with China, strengthen yourself, strengthen your partnership. This is how hedging would look like. And strong and pragmatic policy outlook. This is what India wants to adopt. So the newspaper reading gives you an idea of sense of India's foreign policy. All right. It is not about personalities. It is not about time period ki tab ye hua, ab ye hua, because you are not contesting election. कि आपको दिखाना है कि हमने ज़्यादा किया कि उन्होंने ज़्यादा किया. Foreign policy is of a state, and we are talking about India's foreign policy, and these terms have always been relevant, right? New quadrilateral forum, I2, U2 क्या है? अगर आप अखबार पढ़ेंगे, PIB पढ़ेंगे, ये लाइन आपको मिल जाएगी. It's a new quadrilateral forum for expanding economic and political cooperation in the Middle East. We use the term West Asia in India and Asia, including through trade, combating climate change, energy cooperation, and increasing maritime security. All right. Maritime security का भी मतलब केवल naval warfare नहीं होता. Making the seas safe for movement of ships. Ships are moving in the seas for trade, carrying energy, and there are also naval ships. All right. तो ये आपको पढ़ने से पता चलता. Enhance engagement among the four countries on shared priorities such as food security, clean energy, waste management, infrastructure development. All right. So ultimately, I agree with all of your points. If you read, you will get this sense कि ऐसा हो रहा है, कुछ नया करने की आपको ज़रूरत नहीं है, राइट? ये केवल आपको ये बताने के लिए था कि सिंप्लीफाई करो, सिंपली पढ़ते रहो. अब आगे चलते हैं. इसी तरह से एक अखबार पढ़ा द हिंदू, राइट? इसको मैंने डिटेल में किया है 2022 को, सो दैट यू गेट द प्रोसेस, राइट? ये आपको अखबार मिल गया. अखबार में इस तरह की चीज़ें छपती रहती हैं I2, U2 के बारे में, ठीक है? इट्स अ गेम चेंजर एज द इजरायली एम्बेसडर इज सेइंग, राइट? What is it that is expected of India? So about I2, U2, you gain knowledge by these things, because I2, U2 is not a very established thing. It's a new way of doing business. All right? UPSC ने immediately पूछ लिया, आपको टाइम नहीं मिला ज़्यादा सोचने का. इसी तरह से question 4. Question 4 involves issues. Now the issue can be climate, the issue can be energy, the issue can be current atmosphere, right? And it can be in the essay also. So you remember some of the sayings, all right, ये देख रहे हैं आप, share your wealth with the poor, O son of Kunti, do not give it to richest, to the already rich, medicine is useful to the sick, what use does it have for healthy person, all right. इसका मतलब है कि भाई जिसको ज़रूरत है उसको उसकी ज़रूरत के हिसाब से हमें देना चाहिए, इसका मतलब डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज़ को उनका हक मिलना चाहिए, राइट। ये इस तरह की सेइंग्स क्या कह रही हैं, ये आपको यूट्यूब वीडियो बनाने वाला विद्वान नहीं बना रही हैं, ये आपको बता रही हैं कि यू कैन ब्रिंग इन वैल्यूज दैट दीज आर ऑलरेडी एस्टैब्लिश्ड, राइट। सेकेंडली यू हैव फ्रॉम द महा उपनिषद समथिंग दैट यू कीप ऑन रिपीटिंग, ऑल राइट, वसुधैव कुटुंबकम। तो मैं कहता हूँ उसके आगे पीछे की लाइन भी देख लो, अयम निज परावेति गणना लघु चेतसाम उदार चित्तानाम तु वसुधैव कुटुंबकम। इसी का एक वर्जन है जो कि आपको मिलता है, राइट, यहाँ पे। तो ये बेसिकली आपको एक आइडिया दे रहा है कि आप कोड ऐसे कर सकते हैं। और फिर आप अगर आईआर से रिलेटेड कोई मॉडर्न चीज़ देखें तो ये थीम्स यहाँ से निकल के आती हैं। व्हाट इज़ द थीम ऑफ G20? वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर। इस तरह की चीज़ें नज़र आनी चाहिए, राइट। मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कोट लिखना चाहिए, इट्स ऑल डिपेंडेंट ऑन वर्ड लिमिट, बट दीज कोट्स आर अल्टीमेटली लीडिंग टू समथिंग, ऑल राइट। ये आइडिया, ऑल राइट, ठीक है। और जो यात्रा थी आपको कैसे करनी थी, UNFCCC, क्योटो, आइडेंटिफाई प्रिंसिपल्स लाइक CBDR, कॉमन बट डिफरेंशिएटेड रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, रिस्पेक्टिव कैपेबिलिटी। यू गो टू पेरिस, identify the idea of nationally determined contribution, you understand developed and developing, you identify cooperation that India entered into with basic countries, all right, for negotiation, right. Mitigation adaptation के लिए finance and technology is important. This is basically what the applied form of CBDR is, कि हम क्या मांग रहे हैं, हाँ हम करेंगे लेकिन हमको भी चाहिए क्या, फाइनेंस और टेक्नोलॉजी, ऑल राइट। और इसी तरह से बाकी सारे एग्जाम्पल्स, ये फाइनेंस टेक ये सब कैसे आएगा, CBDR कैसे इंश्योर होगा, जब सब कोऑपरेट करेंगे। किन से कोऑपरेशन है, पार्टनरशिप विद जर्मनी, ग्रीन अर्बन मोबिलिटी, यूरोपियन यूनियन, डेनमार्क इसी साल के करंट अफेयर्स में, राइट। ग्लासगो COP26, द आइडिया ऑफ नेट जीरो इज अ सिंबल ऑफ इंडियाज ambitions, where do we want to go, international solar alliance, one sun one world one grid, 2022 NDC revision, all right, and then initiatives like CDRI, Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, all of them have concerns on environment and energy, mission life। ये basically इतना सा आपको याद रहे और आप सेंटेंस खुद से बनाते हैं, है ना। सेंटेंस आपको कोई रटा नहीं सकता कि ये सेंटेंस रट लो, but you understand that these words, when the answer comes, when it comes to writing answer, I will use these words, ऐसा आपको सोचने की ज़रूरत है। It's simply a snapshot of the process and then how would it look like, क्या आपके दिमाग में रहेगा। एग्जाम में you will make sentences, all right। Similarly going forward, अब कुछ टर्म जैसे मैं पढ़ रहा था, मैं आपको एक एग्जाम्पल केवल दिखा रहा हूँ कि आप कोई भी बड़ा सा पढ़ रहे होगे, एक बार तो पढ़ना पड़ेगा, लेकिन आपको कुछ चीज़ें दिख जाएंगी। That India's commitment is a reflection of Panchamrit of India's action plan against climate change, which India announced in COP26. All right, Panchamrit of India's action plan. It's a simple word. It's a word which may be in fashion these days. So वो आपके आंसर में दिख गया, तो थोड़ा अलग दिख गया, प्रेजेंटेशन एस्पेक्ट है ये बस, ऑल राइट, सब्सटेंस तो हो ही रहा है। इसके अलावा ये जो हमने अपना नेशनली डिटरमिन्ड कंट्रीब्यूशन जमा किया है, इसके अंदर दो तरह के गोल हैं, क्वांटिफाइड, नॉन क्वांटिफाइड गोल्स। ये जितना लेवल पे आप जा पाएं, क्वांटिफाइड गोल कैसा दिखेगा, हमारा एम है टू रिड्यूस एमिशन इंटेंसिटी ऑफ जीडीपी बाय 5% बाय 2030 एज कंपेयर टू 2005 लेवल। तो कुछ क्वांटिफाइड गोल्स हैं हमारे, तो इसीलिए उनके लिए तो नंबर याद करना पड़ेगा ना, वहां पे डेटा आपके काम आता है। और कुछ नॉन क्वांटिफाइड गोल है। नॉन क्वांटिफाइड गोल कैसा दिखेगा, राइट, ऐसा, टू अडॉप्ट अ क्लाइमेट फ्रेंडली एंड क्लीनर पाथ देन द वन फॉलोड हिथरटू प्रायर बाय अदर्स एट द कॉरेस्पॉन्डिंग लेवल्स ऑफ इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट। ये लिखा हुआ है सरकार ने, ऑलराइट। तो हम कंपेयर कर रहे हैं कि हम उतना करेंगे, उससे ज़्यादा करेंगे, जिस लेवल पे अमेरिका था या कोई भी रहा होगा जो कर रहा होगा, उनसे ज़्यादा करेंगे हम, ये हम कह रहे हैं, ठीक है। उसके अलावा सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल आता है। उसके अलावा ये बार बार लाइन आती है, रीजनल, स्टेट, नेशनल, ग्लोबल इन्वॉल्वमेंट। मीनिंग एसए में भी आ सकता है ये, पेपर 1 में भी आ सकता है ये, पेपर 2 में भी आ सकता है ये, पेपर 3 में भी आ सकता है ये, और एथिक्स में तो ये $1 मिलियन क्वेश्चन है ही कि पहले क्या एनवायरनमेंट को बचाएं या डेवलपमेंट करें. ऑलराइट, सो रीड एंड यू विल फाइंड सम ऑफ दी टर्म्स. इसके अलावा जो एक टर्म है जैसे एनालिसिस कभी आपको मिलता है, तो क्रिटिकल एनालिसिस का तो ऐसा होगा, इंडियाज यूएन कमिटमेंट्स एम लो बट इट्स नेशनल पॉलिसीज आर एम्बिशियस. ऑलराइट, बाहर क्योंकि और क्या करेंगे इसलिए हम कर रहे हैं, तो हम हमारा कंट्रीब्यूशन कम दिख सकता है, बट डोमेस्टिकली हम क्या करना चाहते हैं वो एम्बिशियस है. एनालिटिकल लाइंस मिल जाती हैं आपको कभी कभी पढ़ते समय. ऑलराइट, एंड देन ये एक फ्रेज है डेवलपमेंट लिटरेचर से, व्हाट इंडिया इज सीकिंग इज जस्ट अ ट्रांजिशन. ऑलराइट, व्हाट इंडिया इज सीकिंग, सो ग्लासगो के बाद से बात होने लगी ग्रीन एनर्जी ट्रांजिशन. ऑलराइट, ग्रीन ट्रांजिशन मतलब फॉसिल फ्यूल कम करना. सो इंडिया जैसे देश का व्यू क्या होगा, एब्सोल्यूट नहीं हो सकता ये जस्ट ट्रांजिशन. व्हाट इज जस्ट ट्रांजिशन, इट्स अ मीन्स ऑफ ग्रीनिंग द इकोनॉमी इन अ वे दैट इज फेयर and inclusive as possible to everyone concerned, creating decent work opportunities and leaving no one behind. All right, तो तैयारी अगर आपकी हो जाए तो ये आपको नजर आने लगेगा. आई एम ओनली गिविंग यू these as examples. All right, अब आगे चलते हैं. 2021, would you like to take a break? Please take a break. Okay, I think we can start. Let's keep it to a small break. So if you can take your seats, we can continue. Now, if you see 2021 question, right? Just let's go through these questions one by one. If the last few decades were of Asia's growth story, the next few are expected to be of Africa's. Statement within inverted commas, you have to substantiate it in the introduction. Substantiation means you generally would see UPSC uses very vague or general statement. You add some concrete points to it. All right, we will see how. Right now the question, what is the question? In light of this statement, right? श्रीलंका के क्वेश्चन में इन लाइट अंत में कर दिया था, इस क्वेश्चन में इन लाइट पहले कर दिया है. ये इन लाइट का मतलब सिंपल है कि कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, इसमें ज्यादा समय मत बिताओ. इन लाइट, दिस इज ऑलरेडी नोन, हम आपको लाइट दे रहे हैं. इन लाइट का मतलब ये होता है. ऑलराइट, हम लाइट दे रहे हैं आपको, आपको नहीं बल्ब इन्वेंट करना है. यू डोंट हैव टू इन्वेंट द बल्ब, right? You just remember this is the context and then you answer the question. All right, examine India's influence in Africa in recent years. Examine जब भी आए खास तौर पे ध्यान रखना, you break down your answer. 1 2 3 4 5 different elements should be visible, right? So for example यहाँ पे सब हेडिंग बनाने का सबसे काम आता है, right? सबसे यूजफुल होता है. कैसे? Examine India's influence in Africa in recent years. How would you do that? What is this question about? मैंने शुरुआत में आपको बताया था, the questions are about, go back to what I told you. What kind of questions do we see in UPSC mains examination on IR? Do you remember? शुरुआत में ही बोला था. किस तरह के question? Relations. So these relations based question, India's relations with Africa. Read it in that sense. Have a common sense. Keep your approach very, very simple. You cannot establish influence by saying that India is superior, India is superior. You simply can establish influence by saying what India is doing. And that's where the context of first statement is important. Right? Africa is seen to be a potential continent. Africa is going to grow. But most of the world's interest has been in Africa's resources. That's why Africa is important. India as a developing country needs those resources. Right? India needs those resources. But at what cost? Can India's influence be about resource extractor or an equal partnership? That India is aiming an equal partnership. Alright? So that's where, let's go to this. आज के अखबार में ये था. I was just reading newspaper. It's about geology, it's about geography. We know about continental drift. All right. Africa आया इसमें. India has similar geographic history to parts of South Africa. Your introduction in IR can also start with this if you don't remember anything. All right. That India and Africa share much in common, including a geological past. In the contemporary times, India's engagement with Africa is based on historic cultural engagements, vibrant economic exchanges, shared security concerns, and the shaping global climate. Right? Introduction हो गया आपका. लेकिन जब भी आप अखबार में ऐसा देखें तो आप देखें कि अफ्रीका कहाँ कहाँ आ सकता है. अफ्रीका का क्वेश्चन आ सकता है पेपर 1 में आया है. How does India see its role in the resource-rich Africa? How does India see its role is a question of IR. India कैसे देखता है अपने आप को? But it was asked in paper 1. There, drawing of map is important to show resource distribution. All right. There, drawing of map is important. Paper 1 to show resource distribution. Here, not so much. All right. So here is another suggestion. When it comes to thinking about maps, think 3 things. Whether it is required. 2, is it adding value to your answer? 3, are you good at it? Have you practiced enough? Or you are only going to draw few lines etc. और फिर examiner को कहा तू समझता रहे. Right? आप समझते रहिए. So these are the things which go into deciding this. There is not a blanket answer. Should I draw a map, etc., etc. If you are good at it, if you are a geography student, even in this question you can draw a brief map, right? If you are reading news, you can read it from geography perspective, but you can also say if there is an essay, if there is a question, I can have this in the introduction. All right, ये आज के अखबार में था. So read newspaper with interest, be inquisitive, and have the lens of the examination syllabus with you. And now let's see, as I said, substance, what would go into this answer, right? I have told you the structure, कैसे process करोगे, what would go into this answer, right? African century is the belief or hope that 21st century will bring peace, prosperity and cultural revival to Africa. All right, so that's why पहले statement में क्या लिखा हुआ है? It would be Africa's century. You don't have to prove it. It is already talked about by scholars, by those who are engaged with it. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Wheel is already invented. You have to simply say why. Africa is known as last remaining El Dorado. El Dorado was a mythical city of gold in Latin America, South America. Spain, as a colonial power, went searching for that city, meaning opportunities, right? It is a reference to Africa's resources. For example, 30% of global mineral reserves are in Africa. All right? UPSC में pre में question आया था about cobalt production. Related किससे है ये भी? Africa से, right? So UPSC is asking you to develop a integrated thinking. All right? So this is there. India's relations with Africa, as I said, are based on historical, cultural. You take the example of Mahatma Gandhi. इससे पहले कोई कहे ये लिख सकते हैं क्या? मैं बिल्कुल कह रहा हूँ. ये broad categories हैं. Now it is up to you what examples you can think of. Right? Historical, cultural. You can go back to continental drift. Right? There are many interesting geological facts. Right? And then you can come to, for example, trade between India and Africa through Indian Ocean. That was also happening. Right? Or you can come to people like Siddhis, who are of African origin, are found in Gujarat and Karnataka, right? A community, a tribal community, a ethnic group. So this का मतलब है historical, cultural. और क्या? Colonial rule. Indians were taken to Africa to work. Creation of the diaspora. Historical, cultural का modern example हो सकता है diaspora, right? People of Indian origin in Africa. That is also there, right? चलो आगे चलते हैं. Political, diplomatic. What do we share? A common colonial past, a common disdain for colonialism, support for decolonization. This is what linked India and Africa in the 1960s. इतना आप पढ़ेंगे तो आपको अपने आप आइडिया लग जाएगा. So this is basically, in some political ideas we are similar, right? In terms of South-South cooperation, India is global South. African countries are also global South. All right. At the multilateral level, do you remember or do you recall or have you noticed that one of the next prime ministerial visits is going to be South Africa? Why? South Africa में क्या होने जा रहा है? BRICS summit. All right. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. It's a forum grouping of emerging economies. So African countries are also partner in current arrangements with India. All right. So political, diplomatic. Similarly, if you read any article, you will see that there has been an increasing number of bilateral visits to multiple countries. For example, recently the foreign minister was in certain African countries like Mozambique. This is called political, diplomatic. These are political, diplomatic aspects. All right. Then you have India's influence. You have forums like India-Africa Forum Summit. सुना है आपने नाम? India Africa Forum Summit started in 2008, 2011 में हुआ, 2015 में हुआ. Now many news reports are suggesting that the next India Africa Forum Summit should take place with G20 Summit. All right, India Africa Forum Summit, meaning certain platforms we have built to come together and announce economic and trade and investments, right? So again, this is always a part of any relationship. These are parts of any relationship. What are we talking about when we are talking about relationship? These things, right? So of course, economic and trade investments का data यहाँ पे, right? I'm using the statement of External Affairs Minister, India's trade with Africa has risen to 89.5 billion. All right, मतलब कुछ तो नंबर आपको याद रखना पड़ेगा, इस तरह के नंबर आपको याद रखने पड़ेंगे अगर हो पाए तो. Now India's investments in Africa are also rising 73.9 billion for a period of 1996 to 2021. That's what makes your answer concrete, nothing else. कहानी नहीं बतानी है, ये याद है तो याद है, नहीं याद है तो नहीं याद है. All right, तो ये हो गया economic trade investments. Development, India has provided more than 150 lines of credits to African countries, amounting to more than 11 billion for implementation of development projects. All right, that's development cooperation. Then if you would see, India provides duty-free access to 33 least developed countries under what is called duty-free tariff preference scheme. This is development related assistance, right? आपका influence कैसे आता है? अगर आप किसी के लिए कुछ करोगे तो आपका influence है, right? For example, if you are polite to me, I will be more inclined to help you. That is your influence over me. But generally politeness would be taken as weakness. You don't think कि politeness भी influence का एक तरीका हो सकता है, right? Because some people are known to be polite. हर कोई उनकी मदद करना चाहता है, right? और क्यों influence आता है कि वो काम का है, right? So and so, ये influence का मतलब है, और ऐसे ही आप दिखा पाओगे, right? So India is 5th largest trading partner, 5th in investment in Africa, right? इसके अलावा आप क्या दिखाओगे? और India Africa Forum Summit 2015, India had announced $10 billion worth of assistance to Africa, 50,000 scholarships to the students of Africa. All right, ये सब नहीं लिख सकते आप आंसर में, but these are the broad categories that you should represent in the answer, that India's influence is reflected in the following or is reflected through the following. All right, ये आपने कर दिया. उसके बाद COVID-19, right? It can be taken in two ways. One, India provided during COVID-19 medical assistance to African countries. Traditionally, India is known as pharmacy of the world. Why? Because when there was HIV/AIDS pandemic, its treatment was very expensive. India's generic drug manufacturers were responsible for making such medications affordable to African people. So that is one example. COVID-19 also we provided medical help, but we had suspended vaccine supply to COVAX countries. So some articles say that this can be seen as detrimental, right? So you can be critical also, but to only identify कि क्या बेहतर कर सकते हैं, right? Critical का मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप ये कहें कि ये गलत है, IR में तो बिल्कुल नहीं ये करना चाहिए. Critical अगर होना है तो इसलिए हो that you are saying that this is something that we need to do better. All right, that is basically what the meaning is, right? Similarly, if you would see security and defense, India and Africa both suffer from terrorism, right? Terrorism in transnational in nature, so that's one common issue. India and Africa both are bounded by oceans. Indian Ocean is the bridge between them. Maritime security, specifically piracy on the coast of Africa, Western Africa, Southwest, not Western Africa, but Southern Africa and Southwest Indian Ocean region. So ये common security issues. That's why we need to cooperate. We clearly identify defense and security is one area where we need to cooperate more. All right, and then African countries would also like to increase their defense capabilities. How can we help them? By training or by providing them equipments. Equipments depends on our own manufacturing. Our training institutions are much more attractive, right? So that is where we can increase our influence, right? और अब अखबार पढ़ो कुछ सालों में क्या हुआ है. So thereby you can after identifying कि भाई defense security needs more focus, you can give these examples, right? Africa India field training exercise has been conducted recently. So these kinds of initiatives are required more. India Africa Defense Minister Conclave have been happening, right? India Mozambique Tanzania trilateral exercise, right? Similarly, when we organized our defense expo, we invited African defense ministers. That's where the India Africa Defense Conclave had started. So you identified one area where we need to do better, all right, and then you suggested, right? अब इसके साथ बहुत सारी चीजें हैं. right? India's relationship with Africa is based on model of cooperation and is responsive to the needs of African countries. It is demand driven and free of conditions. This is a statement given by the Prime Minister in 2017 meeting of African Development Bank. So this basically very clearly conveys what India's policy towards Africa is. I'll read it again for you. India's relationship with Africa is based on a model of cooperation and is responsive to the needs of African countries. It is demand driven and free of conditions. All right? ये आपको बताना है. Conclusion आपका ये हो सकता है. All right? And the future of India Africa ऐसा लिख के. Right? Future of India Africa relations is bright because. ये करने के बाद वो स्टेटमेंट लिख दो, लेकिन उससे पहले क्या लिखना है? उससे पहले कुछ और बेहतर चीज़ें कर सकते हैं, किससे मदद मिलेगी, या उसके बाद भी आप लिख सकते हैं कि ये करो. सो एशिया अफ्रीका ग्रोथ कॉरिडोर is an initiative which India and Japan have thought of to promote infrastructure, connectivity, which would be demand driven, which would be based on bottoms up approach. So in that sense, it is also seen as a response to BRI, China's BRI. All right? So ये कर सकते हैं, इसको implement करना चाहिए. ठीक है? अब कुछ नया हो रहा है आसपास, हुआ नहीं है. So you can always say the upcoming BRICS summit provides India an opportunity to further strengthen its relations. Right? You can conclude in various ways. You can bring technology. Africa's growing economy needs more digitalization, especially in delivery of public service systems, where Africa can benefit from India's own model of JAM. जनधन, आधार, मोबाइल, ट्रिनिटी. यानी कि आप इंडिया क्या अच्छा कर रहा है उसका भी एग्जांपल दे सकते हैं. तो डिजिटलाइजेशन इज द फ्यूचर. सिमिलरली समथिंग इज हैपनिंग इन अफ्रीका. दिस इज अफ्रीकन कॉन्टिनेंटल फ्री ट्रेड एरिया विच वाज लॉन्च्ड इन 2021, which brings together all the African countries potentially under one umbrella. Africa would become economic bloc. It creates world's largest free trade area in terms of number of participating countries. तो यहाँ पे suggestion है कि given the changing landscape of Africa's economy, India needs to move swiftly to secure a free trade agreement with the AFCFTA, meaning African Continental Free Trade Area. Various ways. राइट आप क्या कर रहे हैं? आप पहले इंडिया का गुण बता रहे हैं, फिर क्या कर रहे हैं? यू आर आइडेंटिफाइंग एरियाज वेयर वी कैन डू बेटर. अब यहाँ पे और आप कुछ और क्या कर सकते हैं? चाइना को ला सकते हैं. दैट चाइना इज लीडिंग इन टर्म्स ऑफ ट्रेड एंड इन्वेस्टमेंट्स विथ अफ्रीका. ऑल राइट, बट वेयर चाइना लैक्स इज द सॉफ्ट पावर दैट इंडिया एंजॉयज इन अफ्रीका. बेटर इमेज और इंडियाज डायस्पोरा इज इंडियाज स्ट्रेंथ इन अफ्रीका. ऑल राइट, ये आपको करने की जरूरत है. ठीक है, तो ये आप जो है या तो आपने कुछ नोट कर लिया होगा, एटलीस्ट आपको आइडिया लगा कि आपको क्या करना है. जब इस तरह का क्वेश्चन आए, इंडिया का इन्फ्लुएंस एटसेट्रा, यू सिंपली ट्रांसलेट दैट क्वेश्चन इन टर्म्स ऑफ रिलेशंस. राइट, क्योंकि इन्फ्लुएंस दिखाने का और कोई तरीका नहीं है. थोड़ा कंपैरिजन कर दो, थोड़ा ये बता दो कि वी कैन पार्टनर विद जापान, वी कैन पार्टनर विद यूएस. राइट, because we know that we have a competition with China. But ये क्वेश्चन चाइना का नहीं है, इसलिए प्रोमिनेंटली चाइना का एग्जाम्पल ही नहीं आना चाहिए. सफिशिएंटली आपको बताना चाहिए कि इंडिया क्या कर रहा है वहां पे. राइट, इसी तरह से पैन अफ्रीका ई नेटवर्क, राइट, ई आरोग्य भारती एंड ई शिक्षा भारती, 2 ई programs have been launched. Second phase, पैन अफ्रीका ई नेटवर्क was launched in 2009. उसके सेकंड फेज में ई आरोग्य भारती, ई शिक्षा भारती was launched in 2019 to provide tele-education, tele-medicine. Right? Be aware of what is happening. Now let's go forward and let's look at the second question. The USA is facing an existential threat in the form of a China that is much more challenging than the erstwhile Soviet Union. अब यहाँ पे आपको difference दिख रहा है? The statement as a whole is being sought to be explained. इसमें ये नहीं लिखा कि in the light of this. So इसका मतलब है now you have to address the statement. राइट, लुकिंग एट द क्वेश्चन यू गेट एन आइडिया कि क्या हो रहा है या यूपीएससी ने ये क्यों किया होगा. तो यहाँ पे स्टेटमेंट है, अब ये स्टेटमेंट एक्सप्लेन करना है. अनदर इंटरेस्टिंग थिंग, आफ्टर मेनी 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 ईयर्स देयर इज अ क्वेश्चन, इंडिया मेंशन नहीं है इसमें. ऑल राइट, सो देन अगेन ईदर यू कैन मेक फॉरेन पॉलिसी और यू कैन बी अ स्टूडेंट. इफ यू आर अ स्टूडेंट यू विल थिंक अबाउट वेयर विल आई ब्रिंग इंडिया इनटू दिस. दैट वुड बी माय यूएसपी इन दिस आंसर. Now this, remember, is an opinion. All right, This is not a scientific hypothesis which has to be proved or disproved. This is an opinion. So then these kinds of questions would require the understanding of why. If somebody is of this view, why? All right? Explain करना है इसको. And thankfully 10 marker ही पूछा. अब यहाँ पे क्वेश्चन अगर आपको दिख गया हो, एक्सप्लेन करना है, राइट? सिंपल स्ट्रक्चर है क्वेश्चन का. अब ये लास्ट के पॉइंट्स जो है इस क्वेश्चन के बारे में. In 2020, China's GDP was an estimated 14.9 trillion, all right? And its GDP is growing, whereby it is only second to United States. And projected estimates are that it would soon surpass the United States. All right? तो इस तरह का, right? Defense budget में आप ये नहीं दिखा सकते, because US defense budget is 800 billion US dollars, China at most is 295. All right? तो वहाँ पे आप नहीं दिखा सकते, but its defense budget is also growing. Its industrial output has increased, but its research output has also increased. All right? So all this is telling you that with its demography, its larger size, and now its economic might and investment in technology and military, China has emerged as the contender for global leadership. Right? That is the threat that US has. Right? अब यहाँ पे ये लाइनें देख लो, बहुत सारे सोर्सेस में ये लिखा होता है, the greatest long-term threat to our national interest, national information and intellectual property, all right, and to our economic vitality is counterintelligence and economic espionage threat from China. ये किसने कहा है? FBI डायरेक्टर क्रिस्टोफर रे. Recent statement है. So basically how threat is being defined. One, economic. That's why in 2018 Donald Trump, US president, had launched what then was called a trade war vis-a-vis China. What was the objective? Reduce the trade deficit. All right. Then you have, अभी आप आजकल देखते हो IPEF, all right, European Union, US Trade Technology Council, Fab 4 Alliance, Chip 4 Alliance. What is this a reflection of? That technology is also an arena of competition between them. All right. And US would like to delay China acquiring semiconductor self-sufficiency in the near future. Last week I was reading the newspaper, Indian Express, Nirupama Subramanian has written a very good article on China, US, and the last part of it is India. All right, so that's why you should be reading newspapers. All right, and then you should also understand that where does India come in? Now, India's concern so much is not whether US leads the world or China leads the world. All right, there is a word used in IR called hegemony. It basically refers to domination. All right, who has preponderance of power capabilities to dominate global affairs. India is against hegemony. India is against bullies. So India does not want China to become a bully, but India would also not like US to become a bully. Right? So that's why the idea of G2 is, you remember what happened between USSR and US? They were enemies. 1962 onwards they started talking, right? And then ultimately they developed an understanding between each other, right? Whereby it was very clear that we are the two most important power. We will keep on competing with each other, but we should manage our relation in such a way that our competition, our contention does not end disastrously for all of us, meaning nuclear power. Similar possibility is there between China and US also, right? This is a phase when US is trying to put pressure on China, but soon would come up, and you should also see that US is also trying to talk to China. All right, that is something that is happening. So ये दुश्मनी का ज़्यादा seriously नहीं लेना चाहिए, right? That the US will side with us. No. Everybody sides with themselves only, right? So that's why if you stand on anyone's side, stand on your own side. All right. So India's foreign policy should be about standing for India. So India would be opposed to any such arrangement, right, driven by this competition, which is driven by the threat perception of the US vis-a-vis China. All right, and that's where you should see that you should bring in Indo-Pacific. It is very clear that the rising profile of China is a factor of instability in Indo-Pacific, and India is willing to partner with the US for stability in the Indo-Pacific. And Quad is a multilateral dialogue platform which is talking about various kinds of cooperation, right? So India is willing to be part of solutions for global and regional stability wherever it is possible, but India wants to avoid entanglement, and India seeks multipolarity as the formula for global stability, right? इसके अंत में आपको इंडिया लेके आना था, बीच में आप इसको कैसे प्रूव करेंगे या कैसे बताएंगे क्यों ये ओपिनियन है? पहला, economic competition, all right? So bring in how China is bridging the gap economically. 2, trade domination. So still US is a large trading partner of China, right? And US is a large export market of China. The largest sovereign bonds of US is held by more than 1 trillion, China, all right? So that is the entanglement that people are thinking about, right? So economic. Second, technology, all right? Technology. Now remember, USSR different है, ये prove नहीं करना है आपको, तो different ही है, right? But technology, जो technology output चाइना का increase हो रहा है, इस तरह से वो threat कर सकता है. तीसरा, maritime security. China is a large Pacific country with vital ports. USSR का weakness एक था. USSR didn't have all-weather warm water ports. Even its port in the Pacific, Vladivostok port, is not an all-weather port. All right. So China has the potential to be a much effective naval power. All right. USSR ने भी capability develop की थी, but USSR को अपना fleet ले जाने के लिए या तो Black Sea use करना पड़ेगा, या it would have to go through the European littoral, and Europe was always an ally of United States. So ये आपको prove नहीं करना, ये example दे के आ जाएगा. So maritime security. चौथा is the global diplomacy. China consistently is demanding reform of the global architecture of governance, meaning IMF, World Bank, it wants to become strong. And if that is not happening, China is also creating institutions, right? With BRICS countries, it has created NDB. On its own, it has created AIIB, all right? So in these senses, and if you see the terminology which is used by the Americans, they say that China is a threat to our interests and our value systems, all right? Why? China is an authoritarian, one-party ruled state, and United States always keeps on talking about democracy, all right? Similarly, USSR did not have an ambitious project like BRI, because USSR was not economically competitive with United States, which China is. And on the back of its success of BRI, it is now, on the back of the success of its economy, it is also now confident enough to launch a BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, all right? स्पेस जा रहे हैं, सारी चीज़ें हो रही है. आपने ये भी पढ़ा होगा कि भाई क्यूबा के अंदर उनका एक एस्पियोनाज सेटअप है. उसके बाद आपने एक हवाना सिंड्रोम नाम की बीमारी सुनी होगी, जिसमें यूएस डिप्लोमेट्स, बहुत सारे यूएस डिप्लोमेट्स बीमार पड़ गए, ऑलराइट? उनको अजीब अजीब से सिम्टम्स आने लगे, राइट? तो फिर ये हुआ कि इलेक्ट्रोमैग्नेटिक वेपन्स का इस्तेमाल कर रहा है चाइना, विच कैन नॉट बी ट्रेस्ड, ऑलराइट? दैट वाज वन इंटरेस्टिंग एग्जांपल. तो एग्जांपल आपको मिल सकता है, पर आपको प्रूव ये नहीं करना है कि ये एग्जिस्टेंशियल थ्रेट है या नहीं है. अगर कोई कह रहा है कि है, तो क्यों है? और यूएसएसआर से अलग इस तरह से है, वन ज्योग्राफी, द पैसिफिक कोस्ट ऑफ चाइना, ऑलराइट, which provides us it with maritime capabilities. Second, economic success. USSR was never as economically successful as China is. And when you are economically successful, it's only a matter of time. You will develop military capabilities as well as scientific capabilities. पैसा है तो कुछ भी हो सकता है, all right? It's subtext, right? लेकिन आप जो भी स्पेशल फैक्ट वैक्ट दो, मैंने आपको केवल ही बताया कि फैक्ट्स के थ्रू ही, राइट? इकोनॉमी, टेक्नोलॉजी, जियोग्राफी, इस तरह के फैक्टर्स के थ्रू ही आप इसको प्रूव कर सकते हो. बट आपका यूएसपी होगा हाउ डू यू ब्रिंग इंडिया, ऑल राइट? डिड यू गेट इट? चलिए आगे चलते हैं. नाउ लेट्स लुक एट द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन. क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन द एम्स एंड ऑब्जेक्टिव्स of SCO, what importance does it hold for India? In these kinds of question, introduction, simply start with what SCO is. SCO, which was formed in 2001, is a prominent regional grouping of countries in Eurasia. All right? ये बता दिया आपने, कितने मेंबर, ये सब बता सकते हैं, ये इंट्रोडक्शन हो सकता है. या ये हो सकता है कि आप रिसेंट समिट के बारे में बता दें, जैसे द करंट समिट इज गोइंग टू बी होस्टेड बाय इंडिया बट वी आर होस्टिंग इट वर्चुअली, राइट? मुश्किल है इस डिप्लोमेटिक सर्कमस्टांसेस में सबका आना, तो वर्चुअली कर रहे हैं, तो वो आप उसको भी इंडिकेट कर सकते हैं. अब पूछ रहा है एम्स एंड ऑब्जेक्टिव्स ऑफ एससीओ. पहला तो पहले तो आपको ये पता होना चाहिए. दूसरा, व्हाट इंपॉर्टेंस डज इट होल्ड फॉर इंडिया. एम्स एंड ऑब्जेक्टिव्स नहीं, एससीओ, व्हाट इंपॉर्टेंस डज इट होल्ड फॉर इंडिया. अब चलो इसका आंसर करते हैं. इसका आंसर बहुत ही सिंपल है. इसका आंसर आपको, ये जो कुछ आर्टिकल्स है मैं देख रहा था जो कह रहे हैं कि चाइना डज नॉट पोज एन एग्जिस्टेंशियल थ्रेट टू अमेरिका, तो इसलिए आपको प्रूव और डिस्प्रूव नहीं करना है. ऑलराइट, अब यहाँ पे अभी का 2023 का स्टेटमेंट है कि चाइना पोजेज एग्जिस्टेंशियल थ्रेट टू यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स. तो आपको समझ में आ रहा है कि इट इज इन डिबेट, इट्स इन द रियल्म ऑफ ओपिनियन. आपको बताना है कि कोई ऐसा क्यों सोच रहा है. ऑलराइट, और अल्टीमेटली क्रिएटिव सॉल्यूशन देना है. और ये है प्रेसिडेंट बाइडेन का स्टेटमेंट 2023 का. ऑलराइट, वी विल ऑल्सो टेक on directly the challenges posed by our prosperity, security and democratic values by our most serious competitor China, using the word competitor. So US official documents are still not using the term existential threat for China. They are defining China not even as an adversary. See, most serious competitor. All right, so that's why prove disprove nahi karna. We'll confront China's economic abuses, economy, counter its aggressive coercive action, geography, all right, to push back on China's attack on human rights, values, intellectual property, science and technology, and global governance. All right, ये basically these are indicators how you should make your points, right? Shanghai SCO वाले question, तो आपको याद रखना है Shanghai spirit. All right, Shanghai Cooperation Organization says that it acts in accordance with Shanghai spirit. Who are the members? Central Asian countries, China, Russia, Pakistan and India. All right, they are the members. So अब आपको ये देखना है कि भाई आप इसको क्रिटिकली एनालाइज कैसे करेंगे. तो पहले देख लो कि एससीओ का रिलेवेंस क्या है. 30% ऑफ ग्लोबल जीडीपी, 40% ऑफ वर्ल्ड्स पॉपुलेशन, ये एससीओ इसलिए सिग्निफिकेंट हो जाता है. इसका मैग्नीट्यूड ये है. किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वाले क्वेश्चन में जब इस तरह का क्वेश्चन है कि इस तरह के फैक्ट्स आपके काम के होंगे. ऑल राइट, फॉर एग्जांपल G7 रिप्रेजेंट्स, G20 रिप्रेजेंट्स, राइट. तो ये इस तरह के बहुत ही कॉमन से फैक्ट्स होते हैं. अब हम जरा एक कदम बस आगे जाते हैं और ये देखते हैं मेन गोल्स ऑफ द एससीओ आर. अब ये केवल इसलिए दिखा रहा हूं कि ये कोई बहुत टेक्निकल या बहुत ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड गोल्स नहीं है. Strengthening mutual confidence and good neighborly relations among the member countries, promoting effective cooperation in politics, trade, economy, science and technology, culture, as well as education, energy, transportation, tourism, environmental protection and other fields. सब कुछ. All right. अब अगला, making joint efforts to maintain and ensure peace, security and stability in the region. Most important, right? Through dialogue, right? Moving towards the establishment of a new democratic, just, rational, political and economic international order. All right, तो ये दो चीजें तो आपको सिंपली याद रह सकती है, इसमें तो सब कुछ है, right? और फिर proceeding from the spirit of Shanghai, the SCO pursues its national internal policy based on the principles of mutual trust, mutual benefit, equal rights, consultations, respect for the diversity of cultures and aspiration towards common development. Its external policy is conducted in accordance with the principles of non-alignment, non-targeting anyone and openness. ठीक है? So selectively first, what should be visible in this kind of an answer is the term like Shanghai spirit. All right. Secondly, it's very clear that SCO is an organization which aims to promote political, economic, cultural and security cooperation among its members. अब दो क्रिटिसिज्म का बेसिस तैयार हो गया. फर्स्ट, व्हाट आर द अचीवमेंट्स ऑफ एससीओ? हैज इट बिल्ड अ रोड? इज देयर अ फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट? है अभी तक? सो क्रिटिसिज्म पहला आता है कि भाई क्या प्रोफेस्ड है और क्या अचीवमेंट है, राइट? दैट SCO's aims and objectives are limited to declarations with a distinct absence of major achievements in the form of agreements like free trade agreement, right? क्योंकि वो खुद ही कह रहा है इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन भी करेंगे, है ना? देख रहे ट्रेड एंड इकोनॉमी, पहला तो ये, तो क्रिटिसिज्म बेस्ड ऑन परफॉर्मेंस, ठीक है। दूसरा, अब कुछ प्रिंसिपल्स लेते हैं, है ना, कि maintain and ensure peace, security and stability in the region. Kazakhstan saw eruption of violence early 2022, all right. Before that also in the Eurasian region there have been other conflicts like Russia-Georgia conflict. This time there is Russia-Ukraine conflict. 2021 there was withdrawal of United States from Afghanistan and resulting instability, or before that also instability in Afghanistan. So SCO, despite its professed aims, has not played any effective role in preventing or resolving regional conflicts. समझ में आ गई आपको बात? एग्जाम्पल से आपको ये दिख रहा है, राइट? Thirdly, SCO maintains a structure called RACS, Regional Anti-Terrorism Structure. But if you would see, and now bring in Pakistan, what is it that Dr. S. Jaishankar recently, though I personally would not say that diplomatically we should use such strong words, but what is it Dr. Jaishankar called the Pakistani foreign ministers? He called Pakistan an exporter of terrorism, all right? So SCO's credentials against terrorism are weakened by it providing membership to a country like Pakistan, which has a checkered record when it comes to promoting terrorism against its own members. SCO के member के खिलाफ ही terrorism promote कर रहा है, all right? ये आपको समझ में आया आपको बात? अब इन principles पे आ जाते हैं. So mutual trust, mutual benefit. Every time when we give a speech at SCO, we will say that countries must respect sovereignty and territorial integrity of other countries. Who is violating it? China. So SCO member countries like China and Pakistan have been violating the Shanghai spirit, the principles of Shanghai spirit, right? उस समय ताज़ा ही था अपना जो बॉर्डर पे लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल पे जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट था, वो एग्जाम्पल आपका यहाँ से आ गया, ऑल राइट? तो इस तरह से आप कर सकते हैं. इसके अलावा अब तो और भी है, रशिया, यूक्रेन, ऑल राइट? सो यू विल सी दैट अगर कमी निकालनी है किसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की, तो आप कमी हमेशा निकाल सकते हैं, क्योंकि कोई भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वो नहीं कर पाता जो वो कहता है कि वो करेगा, ऑल राइट? सिमिलरली प्रमोशन ऑफ कनेक्टिविटी एक आइडिया है. प्रमोशन ऑफ कनेक्टिविटी, इफ यू सी, BRI is endorsed by all the members of SCO. BRI every year is endorsed by all members of SCO, barring one, India. All right, and what is India's problem with BRI? Primary problem, that it violates sovereignty and territorial integrity of countries involved. Example is CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. All right, so this was a question where you needed to make points by simply first acknowledging that you may not remember all the objectives, but still the formula is criticism on the basis of performance, criticism on the basis of failing to live up to the values professed by any organization, as was the case here, right? And towards the end, you should bring the view of India. What is India's view? SCO can play a significant role in peace, prosperity and stability of the Eurasian region. But for that to happen, its member countries should abide by its principles. Most importantly, principles like respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Right? अगर यहाँ तक रुकना होता है, लेकिन क्वेश्चन ने पूछा कि what significance does it hold for India? तो वहाँ पे बहुत सिंपल सा है. Why did we join SCO? One, it provides us access, foothold in Central Asia as well as Eurasia. Two, it provides us a diplomatic platform to interact with friendly countries like Central Asian countries and Russia, and maintain communication with adversarial countries like China and Pakistan, right? Diplomatic platform. Third, broadly India expected to benefit from the counter-terrorism capabilities of RATs, mainly in terms of intelligence. And participation in SEO exercises provide Indian Armed Forces a diverse opportunity for exposure. All right. So, and then there is also this simple idea that members, if you look at the members of SEO, there are two categories of countries: energy producers and energy consumers. Russia, Central Asian countries are energy producers. India, China, Pakistan, energy consumers. So SEO also is seen from the perspective of becoming an energy club. All right, you have OPEC, etc., these kinds of organization. OPEC is a producers organization. You don't have consumers organization. All right, so that's why SEO like organization we can now transform into an energy club, because it has members who are energy consumers, members who are energy producers, right? That's why India wanted to join the SEO. और अब conclusion आएगा that SEO has potential. However, for it to be successful, it needs concrete program of action, plus it needs its members to abide by its declared or professed principles. Most notably, which principle? Respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. ठीक है, तो ये बेसिकली इस एक वर्ड से, शंघाई स्पिरिट से ये आंसर आ सकता था. अब क्वेश्चन नंबर 4, ऑकस. ठीक है, क्वेश्चन नंबर 4 ऑकस के बारे में क्वेश्चन पढ़ लेते हैं. ये क्वेश्चन क्या है? द न्यूली, यहां तो यूपीएससी ने स्पेलिंग मिस्टेक भी की है. ऑल राइट, द न्यूली फॉर्म्ड होना चाहिए था, लेकिन है न्यूली. तो कभी कभी यूपीएससी भी इम्परफेक्ट ही है. ऑल राइट, द न्यूली ट्राइनेशनल पार्टनरशिप ऑकस इज एम्ड एट काउंटरिंग चाइनाज एम्बिशन इन द इंडो पैसिफिक रीजन. फुल स्टॉप. Is it going to supersede the existing partnerships in the region? Discuss the strengths and impact of AUKUS in the present scenario. All right. तो पहला तो स्टेटमेंट है भैया. अब इसमें ना तो कॉन्टेक्स्ट कहा, ना तो इन लाइट ऑफ कहा, राइट. लेकिन अगला क्वेश्चन क्या कह रहा है? भाई ये AUKUS है, आपको इंट्रोडक्शन दे दिया हमने, राइट. अब ये बताओ कि इज इट गोइंग टू सुपरसीड एग्जिस्टिंग पार्टनरशिप्स. तो डिफिकल्टी क्या आई इस क्वेश्चन में? To think what existing partnerships are we talking about. All right, what existing partnerships are we talking about, and thereby understanding that India believes in partnerships, not alliances, would give you ample options, which I will show you. Right, discuss the strength and impact of AUKUS in the present scenario. All right, so first of all, introduction again. Recently Australia, United States, United Kingdom have announced the AUKUS partnership with the aim of strengthening their military cooperation, assisting Australia in acquiring nuclear powered submarine capability, and integration of their military industrial bases or military industrial complex. That was the aim. All right. In this context, AUKUS is seen as an important military initiative in the Indo-Pacific region, which also has the following other initiatives visible. Now here is the game. You have only Quad. So Quad से तो आंसर होगा नहीं. All right, you have Quad. You have what are called ASEAN-centered institutions or ASEAN-led frameworks. What? East Asia Summit. All right, of which India is a member. All right, India is a member of or participant in the East Asia Summit. Right, what else is there? You have India had announced an initiative called Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, a non-binding, non-treaty based, 7-pillar based initiative for cooperation. All right, maritime security, marine environment, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, all these kinds of areas is where India says that there can be cooperation. So Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative is also there. Then you have now the IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity, a dialogue initiated by United States, all right, on economic and trade issues. Right, go forward or go backward, you will also find RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. right? So once your thinking becomes narrowed down, for example, many people think that IR is only about security, all right? You are missing the greater point, that just as domestic politics is not only about security and policing issues, IR is also not only about, so that's why you have a separate defense ministry. Otherwise, there should only have been one ministry, Ministry of External Affairs, right? You have a defense ministry, you have a Ministry of External Affairs. So that means that IR issues are also sufficiently diversified. It's not only security. So these initiatives are there. Now you are aware, Quad is there, ASEAN centered institutions. Example, East Asia Summit is there, right? Then you can have other initiatives, IPOI, Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. Why am I bringing it? Because India is involved here, right? Then you have IPEF. Then you can also say that there is an old organization which is called the APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. And if you also see, you have FIPIC, Forum for India Pacific Islands Cooperation, all right? FIPIC की मीटिंग हुई थी अभी, तीसरी summit in Moresby in Papua New Guinea, if you will remember. Abhi, the newspapers in the month of April had covered Prime Minister's visit to the Pacific region, Japan, all right, Papua New Guinea, Australia. This is the region that we are talking about, right? So this is something. यहाँ पे आप Indo-Pacific का map, specifically the Pacific sector दिखाते हुए मैप बना सकते थे, लेकिन प्रॉब्लम यही होगी कि फिर आपको इंडिया को भी दिखाना होगा, राइट? सो इतनी जगह नहीं होती कभी कभी कि आप इतना बड़ा मैप बना पाए, राइट? तो आपको पहले तो आपको एग्जिस्टिंग पार्टनरशिप समझ में आ गया, ठीक है? स्ट्रेंथ्स एंड impact of AUKUS comes from what AUKUS actually is. So here is your answer. First, you define what AUKUS is by saying recently launched, all right, or recently these countries launched for this purpose. Second, in this context, you have to identify Indo-Pacific. In India's word, Indo-Pacific is a vast arena with multiple opportunities and challenges. There have been multiple ongoing initiatives to deal with these opportunities and challenges, like the following, all right? Quad, all right? So Quad is a dialogue platform between 4 democracies of the Indo-Pacific, which has a diverse focus. It is not limited to security, right? It is, for example, focusing on maritime issues. It is focusing on technology. It was then focusing on vaccines. So AUKUS and Quad are 2 separate initiatives and thereby not likely to impact each other, all right? Then IPOI के साथ भी वही है. It's a much broader initiative. India is anchoring the IPOI, and India does not believe in increasing military alliances as a way of dealing with challenges, including regional stability and security challenges. So IPOI basically focuses on what is called rules-based order, all right? Rules-based order, that is, the conduct of country should be guided by commonly agreed upon rules and institutions, not by the logic of power, right? If I am powerful, I should do this. There should be rule which should be commonly applicable on everyone. Then you bring in ASEAN-centered institution. So the East Asia Summit, for example, as an ASEAN-centered institution, has been in place since 2005. It predates much of these initiatives, and it had always focused on dialogue, on strategic issues, as a way of ensuring the stability of this vital region. It's a vital region for the globe, not only for these countries, right? So that is EAS. And India has professed ASEAN centrality. Here you brought in India. ऐसे आप इंडिया को ला रहे हैं. इंडिया क्या कहता है? ASEAN centrality. ASEAN is central to any future developments in the Indo-Pacific on issues like economy or security or stability, all right? And then you can bring in other initiatives also in this. पर मैंने आपको जो example दिया वो जहाँ इंडिया involved है, Quad, IPOI and East Asia Summit, all right? And words like ASEAN centrality, words like rules based order. Even if China is a problem, the solution is not कि लाठी लेके अपनी बात मनवानी है. The solution is engagement, finding out common ground, finding out rules, binding China with rules. Now, discuss the strength and impact of the AUKUS includes all these concerns, right? So towards the end you will say that the AUKUS is based on the long-standing alliance between the Anglophone countries. It's a jargon, Anglophone, English-speaking countries, right? It's a traditional alliance. US, UK have been traditional allies. They are part of NATO, all right? NATO is a military alliance. Australia was also part of the Allied powers during Second World War, all right, meaning fought war with United States. There is a treaty called ANZUS, Australia, New Zealand, United States Treaty. It's an old treaty based on military alliance. So the strength of the AUKUS is based on the traditional or traditionally close military ties between the participating countries. It consolidates the US efforts to militarily counter China's rise and assertion. All right, it's a military way of countering China's rise and assertion. So it consolidates US efforts. But US is bringing its partners together. That is what its strength is. And since Indo-Pacific is a maritime region, the primary focus of AUKUS was on providing Australia with the capability of nuclear powered submarine. So Australia's nuclear powered submarine capability would alter the strategic balance in this region and enable these countries to counter China's military adventurism. All right. So that is its strength, that these countries have old habit of cooperating with each other. Its strength is that it represents US effort to consolidate, US military effort to consolidate response to China, reaction to China. And thirdly, it's one specific aspect which is development of, and that is a strategic weapon. All right, nuclear powered submarine, why is it important? Because other submarines would have to refuel. A nuclear powered submarine can stay underwater for longer duration because it is being fueled by nuclear reactor. The only reason why it would have to come up is for its operators, वो तो इंसान होंगे ना, वो तो रोबोट से चलेगा नहीं, उनको तो खाना खाना है, बीमार होंगे, तो यही एक रीजन इससे ऊपर आएगा, इसलिए एसएसएन्स को एक अलग कैटेगरी ऑफ वेपन्स में देखा जाता है, राइट? दैट इज बेसिकली डिफरेंट लेवल ऑफ पावर प्रोजेक्शन. All right, so that's where it worries China. That's why it has attracted negative reactions from China, and China also raised the issue कि भाई the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, prevents transferring of nuclear weapons technology. AUKUS, by helping Australia developing SSN capability, is violating the NPT. There was a debate. India opposed China's position. All right. And IAEA and China withdrew that objection. But it drew negative reactions from China. Why? Because it is doing something militarily. All right, China wants to dominate the Pacific, it can't do so. All right, क्योंकि अब ये हो रहा है. और अब एक और चीज़ आप ला सकते हैं कि भाई UK had receded from this region. If you remember, in the colonial times, UK was present here, Singapore, parts of Malaysia, many of the Pacific islands. So it has receded. So the AUKUS then again brings UK in the affairs of the Pacific. ये हो गया इसका strengths and impact, right? And the Chinese reaction, right? So India को हम दो तरीके से लाए और initiatives को identify करने में इस question का purpose यही था. All right, mainly कि आप ये समझ पा रहे हैं कि नहीं समझ पा रहे हैं कि this is India's civil service examination. So no matter the question is about anyone else, you should be answering it from India's perspective. US की foreign policy के perspective से नहीं. All right. And secondly, we will bring India in the conclusion. India stands for a rules-based order, and its preference for dialogue is well established as a way of promoting regional stability. It is evident that India remains away from the AUKUS and focuses on the other initiatives like the Quad, etc. For the foreseeable future, this is going to remain the course that India adopts, right? Because military game is a dangerous game. खेलना सबको पसंद है ना? खेलना सबको पसंद है, लेकिन शुरू हुआ तो कब रुकेगा ये किसी को नहीं पता. जैसे रशिया यूक्रेन क्राइसिस, तो इतना अनएंडिंग गेम खेलना तैयार हो तो आप समझो. और यूएस को समझते हो तो यूएस के पास तो टाइम ही टाइम है दुनिया का, है ना. इट्स डिफेंस स्पेंडिंग इज 800 बिलियन यूएस डॉलर्स. चाइना का मिला दो, रशिया का मिला दो, वो डायलॉग है ना बाप का दादा का सबका. तो चाइना के मिला दो, रशिया के मिला दो, इंडिया का मिला दो, ब्राज़ील का मिला दो, साउथ अफ्रीका का मिला दो, सबका मिला दो मिलिट्री बजट, तब भी यूएस को टच नहीं करता. सो व्हाट गेम यूएस इज प्लेइंग इज नॉट नेसेसरली द गेम दैट वी वुड लाइक टू प्ले. ऑलराइट, वी वुड लाइक टू बेनिफिट फ्रॉम द पार्टनरशिप. क्या सीख सकते हैं तुमसे, कहाँ पे मदद मिल सकती है, और वो मिलिट्री बिल्कुल भी नहीं है. राइट, सो अगेन कीप ऑन रीडिंग एंड यू जनरली वुड सी दैट यू विल फाइंड योर आंसर्स. यह मैं आपको दो चीजें दिखा रहा हूं सो दैट यू आर गाइडेड फॉर आंसरिंग दीज क्वेश्चंस. यह फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी का स्टेटमेंट है. ऑलराइट, फ्रॉम आवर पर्सपेक्टिव ऑकस हैज नीदर रिलेवेंस टू क्वाड nor will it have any impact on its functioning. Do you see the impetus of the question? Question में word क्या use हुए हैं? Relevance. How would it affect other? Impact. All right. So from our perspective, it has neither relevance to Quad nor will it have any impact on its functioning. Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla. Statement given in the same year where the UPSC asked the question. If you are reading newspaper, you are basically getting aware with India's views, and once you know India's views, there is no adventurism involved in writing IR answers. वो simple exercise होगी, 4 question करने हैं, आराम से करना है और आगे बढ़ना है. All right. Second, the Quad and the AUKUS are not groupings of a similar nature. Quad is a plurilateral grouping, a group of countries who have shared vision of their attributes and values. They also have a shared vision of Indo-Pacific region as a free, open, transparent and inclusive region. This is the statement of Foreign Secretary, then Foreign Secretary, now the Chief Coordinator of G20, Harshvardhan Shringla. All right. So many a times preparing for IR, what we miss in our preparation is what India is saying, what MEA is saying, what India's foreign minister is saying, है ना. प्रोवोकेटिव टाइप की चीज़ें याद हो जाती हैं, ठग लाइव टाइप के वीडियो बनते हैं उस पर कि ऐसा जवाब दिया वैसा जवाब दिया. बट द पोजिशन ऑफ इंडिया इट डज नॉट चेंज इन वन नाइट. राइट, सो IR इज एक्साइटिंग अगर बनाना चाहो तो, बट IR इज ऑल्सो बोरिंग एंड इट इज गुड दैट इट शुड रिमेन बोरिंग बिकॉज इट्स अ सीरियस एक्सरसाइज. इट इज नॉट फॉर एंटरटेनमेंट. बट द गुड थिंग इज दैट यू आर नॉट मेकिंग फॉरेन पॉलिसी, यू आर ओनली राइटिंग एग्जामिनेशन. So I am only saying, suggesting, beware of these things, right? तो 2022 कर लिया, 21 कर लिया, शुरुआत इसलिए की थी रिसेंट से हो, डिटेल में करें थोड़ा, फिर दूसरे ईयर में जाएं. वह 2020 में जा रहे हैं. 2020 was not a normal year. All right. अब देखो अखबार पढ़ोगे तो 2021 no link between AUKUS and Quad says India. किस अखबार में है? The Hindu. The Hindu, read the Hindu or read the Indian Express. You are getting the same content. All right. Now let's go to 2020. Right. ये आसान हो जाएगा थोड़ा सा, हम कर चुके हैं. पर्पस क्या? critically examine the role of WHO in providing global health security during COVID-19 pandemic. It's a question which is inspired by and has to be answered by the current affairs of that particular year. And throughout the year, WHO was in news. So it was logical that UPSC would ask a question. UPSC sometimes gives you a googly also. You expect a question to be asked in that year, it doesn't ask. पर आपका काम UPSC को डबल गेस करना नहीं है. आपका काम है whatever important is going on in that particular year, pay attention to it. Imagine it as question worthy issue. तो WHO पे UPSC ने क्वेश्चन पूछ लिया, 10 मार्कर पूछा. ठीक है. Critically examine the role of WHO in providing global health security during COVID-19 pandemic. चलो, तो पहले तो रोल पता होना चाहिए WHO का. प्रिपेयर कर रहे हो, हेल्थ इज एन इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक, कैन बी आस्क्ड इन पेपर 1, पेपर 2, पेपर 3 इन डिफरेंट फॉर्म्स. ऑल राइट. ठीक है, समझ में आ रही है आपको बात मैं क्या कह रहा हूं. तो ये कब का है? ये इसी साल का है. 21 मई 2023 Prime Minister addresses 76th session of the World Health Assembly in Geneva. World Health Assembly is the highest decision making body of the WHO. WHO has completed 75 years. All right. It was formed in 1948, and its goal is very simple: to promote health for all. All right. So that is something that can be starting point. You can always correlate, keep reading. क्या कह रहे हैं हम क्या करना चाहते हैं. इसमें यही बताया कि भाई वी प्रोवाइडेड वैक्सीन्स ड्यूरिंग कोविड-19, इंडिया इज कमिटेड टू प्रोवाइड सपोर्ट एटसेट्रा. राइट, ऐसा हमने कहा है. इसको केवल एक एग्जांपल के लिए दिखा रहा हूँ कि WHO किस तरह से आ सकता है और आप पेपर कैसे दे सकते हैं. उस साल अखबार पढ़ते तो ऐसे आर्टिकल्स आपको दिखते. व्हाट अबाउट WHO ऑन फेलियर्स ऑफ कंटेनमेंट ऑफ कोविड-19. मतलब इजी. न्यूज़पेपर रीडिंग टेल्स यू कि क्या चल रहा है आजकल. ऐड आता है ना, फॉग चल रहा है ना. तो इतने बार वो ऐड सुनते सुनते उस ऐड से थोड़ा सा अवर्जन हो गया है, लेकिन चला ना वो इतने समय तक. तो अखबार पढ़ने पे आपको ये पता चलता रहता है कि क्या चीज़ लगातार चल रही है. राइट, व्हाट इज इट विच इज बीइंग टॉक्ड अबाउट रेगुलरली. सो देन यू गेट अ सेंस कि इस पे फोकस करना है. ऑल राइट, दिस इज समथिंग दैट आई नीड टू फोकस ऑन. राइट, so that's also another benefit. So यहाँ पे basically ये बात है कि भाई US was accusing WHO of siding with China, that China को clean chit दे दी WHO ने. Right, so this was one of the criticisms how WHO is functioning. Let's move forward. Let's look at the role of the WHO. Right, so Prime Minister की स्पीच से एक लाइन मैंने निकाली to just give you an idea कि पूरे आर्टिकल से आपको क्या ढूंढना होता है. Role of global institutions like WHO will be even more important for the challenges that lie ahead in the future. You can conclude with this. All right, you can always conclude with this. Right, now if you see about WHO, created in 1948, it is what is called a specialized agency of the UN. Right, it's an intergovernmental organization. It tells you, it means that governments are the primary participants. It also means that governments ultimately affect the decision making of WHO. It also means that WHO depends for its funding on governments. All right, तो अब ये बेचारा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन क्या कर लेगा. तो किसी भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की बुराई करने से पहले ये हमेशा याद रखना, एनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन इज एज गुड एज बैड, एज सक्सेसफुल एज फेल्योर एज इट्स मेंबर्स मेक इट टू बी. एंड बाय मेंबर्स का मतलब हर कोई नहीं है ना. तुवालू, वनुआतू, ऑल दीज आर इंपॉर्टेंट कंट्रीज, but it is about the important countries. All right, so there is always geopolitics involved. All right, पहले 2022 में भी देखा climate change की geopolitics. Right, so that's where developing हम लेके आए. So geopolitics is involved everywhere. So what is its role? It's an intergovernmental organization with ambitious goal of attaining highest level of health for all. Right, it wants to assist the globe achieve this goal. It's a very noble goal, exalted goal. But what kind of a body is this? So basically it acts as depository of scientific knowledge, good health practices, coordinates the action of individual member and non-state actors. So understand its primary role always has been to collect information, collect knowledge and to share knowledge. All right, it does not have a danda in its hand so that it can implement things. All right, it cannot take coercive action. In बेचारे organization का यही problem होता है. Right, so that's where you will see that WHO did some is important. We need to have such a body when we see that a health crisis can cross boundaries. Why? So that we are warned at the earliest when there is a crisis emerging, that there is pneumonia like infection reported from the city of Wuhan in China, and it seems that it may be contagious. ऐसा हमको पता हो तो हम बॉर्डर बंद करने लगेंगे. Right, so WHO for example did something as a warning. On January 30, health emergency of international concern was declared. Recently a related news was there. WHO is saying that it is no longer a emergency. All right, और तो ये आप देख रहे हैं कुछ शुरू वहाँ पे हुआ, यहाँ पे खत्म हुआ. So first of all, the role of WHO was in terms of warning. It was in terms of sharing the knowledge for management of COVID-19. It was in terms of helping countries who need help in capacity building, including vaccine testing, etc. right? So WHO, by doing this, yeah, announcing a health emergency of international concern, was doing its job. Secondly, if you see, WHO also initiated, for example, on 18th March 2020 itself, what is called Global Solidarity Trial. यहाँ पे जितने है ना क्लोरोक्विन, जितनी भी दवाइयाँ थी जो कह रहे थे कि ये कोविड के लिए काम आएगी, ये ट्रायल किया और इस कंक्लूजन पे पहुंचे कि इनमें से कोई भी इफेक्टिव नहीं है. तो ये काम किया WHO ने अपना, जो साइंटिफिक काम है. 2020 WHO पार्टनर लॉन्च्ड COVID-19 एक्सेस टू COVID-19 टूल्स एक्सेलरेटर, ACT. आज भी करंट अफेयर्स में कहीं पे आप पढ़ते हैं ACT. ACT का मतलब क्या है? एक्सेस टू COVID-19 टूल एक्सेलरेटर, मीनिंग इंफॉर्मेशन कोलेटेड एंड मेड एक्सेसिबल फॉर एवरीवन. ऑलराइट, जो भी जरूरी है वो. तो ये काम इसने किया, राइट. एंड देन कोवैक्स फैसिलिटी जो है, तो बहुत सारे लोगों ने एक लीडरशिप ली वैक्सीन डेवलप करने में, उसमें से एक कोवैक्स है. सो कोवैक्स फैसिलिटी जो ACT का वैक्सीन पिलर है, राइट. कोवैक्स ACT का वैक्सीन पिलर है. WHO worked with Gavi Alliance, right, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, UNICEF, to accelerate development and production of vaccines. This is what WHO did. So whenever there is something critical, it is not only criticism. First acknowledge what the role of WHO is and what it may have done which is praiseworthy. ठीक है, as brief as possible. Now the burai, right? So basically WHO's actions were criticized for being delayed. All right, it was debated whether WHO declared public health emergency of global concern, international concern, well in time, or did it delay? Did it delay in getting the information? Because WHO के जो timeline available थे, they were giving two different facts, right? One said November, December में report हुआ था, another said कि 4 January को ऐसा हुआ, right? So there was lack of correct information initially. So इस तरह के points आप किस तरह के words में कर सकते हैं? Information and transparency. All right. So lacunas in information in transparency, lack of timeline, timely action. Also, secondly, WHO initially itself rejected the assertions on the lab origins of the COVID-19 virus, which was being accused by many. Some बहुत सारे लोग conspiracy theory में चले गए थे, लेकिन आप शुरुआत में नहीं कह सकते ना कि ये किस origin का है. The origins were not clear, right? So WHO's information and assertion on the origins of the virus were also debatable. ऐसा हुआ, right? Then WHO unnecessarily praised China's role, that China has taken a timely action and China has set example in managing outbreak of pandemic emergency. It was premature. WHO should not have done that. It was not the role of WHO. US was criticizing China. Donald Trump was criticizing China. WHO did not need to come into that. That's why the Director General of WHO was criticized, right? So it unnecessarily made the issue complicated by inviting geopolitics into it. All right, when China and US were contending with each other. Knowledge translation. We know that such a pandemic can be a crisis. एक तो बहुत ही famous Bill Gates का TED Talk है, in which he is clearly saying that the next big crisis is such kind of contagious infection. All right, he is very clearly saying that. Those of us who were watching TED Talk remember that TED Talk. बट हमारे पास भी इतना दिमाग नहीं था कि हम सोचे कि 2020 में ही हो जाएगा. लेकिन WHO के पास ये जानकारी थी कि इन 2001 एंथ्रैक्स, बर्ड फ्लू, ऑलराइट, द डिजीजेस ऑफ दिस नेचर, respiratory infections caused by coronavirus family, it was known. And it was also known that this can lead to a global pandemic because of chances of mutation. So WHO can be criticized in having the knowledge but not acting on knowledge translation of knowledge into action. All right, because we already know since 2001 that respiratory infection is possible to spread at a global scale. US में हुआ था, right? The anthrax spread. So that is its criticism, right? And then WHO was also criticized by US. India also expressed its dissatisfaction over the role of WHO. All right, and some people would say WHO has underperformed in its use of the International Health Regulation. IHR, International Health Regulation, is a founding document of WHO, 2005, right? And it is basically a treaty which every member of WHO also accepts or has approved. So WHO did not sufficiently exercise its influence coming from the IHA. ये भी कहने की बात है, राइट? तो ये क्रिटिसिज्म था WHO का. उसके रीजंस बहुत सारे हैं. पहला रीजन क्या है, तो जो आप क्रिटिसाइज करें तो नीचे थोड़ा सा कैविएट भी देते हैं, दैट दीज क्रिटिसिज्म ऑफ WHO हैव टू बी सीन इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ इट्स लिमिटेशंस. What are its limitations? What is the nature? WHO has had dual nature, knowledge based and policy oriented organization. तो ये नॉलेज और पॉलिसी पे काम करते हैं, not necessarily diplomacy or publicity. All right, so outreach was weak, funding is not available for such kinds of activities, right? Then WHO governance structure and financial means. WHO governance structure is full of science experts, all right, is full of scientific expertise, but you also need people who are well versed in public relations, who are well versed in corporate governance. Why? Corporate governance के थ्रू ही आप फंडिंग और जगह से अट्रैक्ट कर पाओगे, ऑल राइट, और पब्लिक रिलेशंस के थ्रू ही आप परसेप्शन के इश्यूज को मैनेज कर पाओगे. बहुत सारे WHO का क्रिएशन का जो क्रिटिसिज्म था वो परसेप्शन बेस्ड था, राइट? तो ये बेसिक बात है. गवर्नेंस का स्ट्रक्चर, फाइनेंशियल मीन्स. WHO receives most of its funding from what is called voluntary contribution, all right, which is contribution which depends on the wishes of the countries. If they want to give, they can give. If they don't want to give, they don't want to give. So if there is a large donor, it means that they would like to exercise control over your decision making. पैसा कहाँ खर्च होता है, मलेरिया पे खर्च होता है, कैंसर पे खर्च होता है, कहाँ खर्च होता है, right? So this dependence on voluntary contribution is something that is also a weakness of WHO. Inherent political nature of its governance and decision making process, right? World Health Assembly, right, is an assembly where the health ministers of countries represent, right, their countries. So of course the decision making is also taking place on a political basis. It is not taking place necessarily on the basis of the most sound technical advice, right? So politics comes into it, geopolitics comes into it, right? So then you suggest what reforms are required, and we all know for a very long time what reforms are required. Funding reforms are required, all right? Funding reforms are required, meaning WHO needs to ensure that bulk of its funding comes from mandatory funding rather than voluntary funding, all right? WHO needs to diversify its sources of funding also. ये पता है हमको. IHA और इंटरनेशनल हेल्थ रेगुलेशंस, IHR जो है, well, 2005 document. Now with lessons from COVID-19 we need to bring about changes, because this is the base document of WHO in terms of its advisories etc. तो अब हमको समझने की जरूरत है कि टाइमलाइंस को चेंज करना है, कम्युनिकेशन को चेंज करना है. तो IHA गवर्नेंस, basically there has to be a balance between political interests of countries, representation, and the requirement of scientific rigor, technical input, all right? तो staffing में तो scientific technical input है, decision making is political. So that balance is required, all right? So ये जरूरत है. और दूसरा फिर इंडिया को ले आओ. Technology infusion would enable the WHO to perform its functions better. कुछ नहीं तो फिर इंडिया का कोविन प्लेटफॉर्म आजकल हम सबको दे रहे हैं, राइट? वी डेवलप दी कोविन प्लेटफॉर्म, राइट? मैं ये नहीं कह रहा 2020 में एग्जांपल आप दे सकते थे. मैं ये इसको इसीलिए लास्ट में ऐड किया ना कि अब कुछ इस तरह का क्वेश्चन आए तो इस बारे में भी सोचो, राइट? वैसे कोविन के डेटाबेस में काफ़ी बड़ा ब्रीच हुआ है, अभी की तो न्यूज़ यही है, बट कोविन इज अ बिग प्लेटफॉर्म इन विच मेनी पीपल आर इंटरेस्टेड. तो एक अफ्रीका का क्वेश्चन है, मैंने कहा टेक्नोलॉजी, जैन, जनधन आधार मोबाइल ट्रिनिटी, राइट? डिजिटलाइजेशन ऑफ पब्लिक सर्विस डिलीवरी, वो. और इस तरह में भी आप बता सकते हैं कि क्या है जो इंडिया ला सकता है ऑन दी टेबल, राइट? WHO का ये क्वेश्चन, 10 नंबर की मुश्किल है, पर ये सारी लाइनें लिखनी नहीं है ना, ये समझाने के लिए भी थी, तो पॉइंट्स बन सकते हैं आपके, ये मैं कह रहा हूँ आपसे, राइट। और अब चलते हैं इंडियन डायस्पोरा। डायस्पोरा का अब एक क्वेश्चन आ गया, हैज अ डिसाइसिव रोल टू प्ले इन द पॉलिटिक्स इकोनॉमी ऑफ अमेरिका एंड यूरोपियन कंट्रीज, इन्वर्टेड कॉमर्स में, राइट। कॉमेंट विथ एग्जाम्पल्स, तो यहाँ पे मेन फोकस क्या है, जितने एग्जाम्पल ला सकते हैं उतना ये आंसर बेटर हो सकता है। कुछ प्रूफ वगैरह करने के चक्कर में नहीं पड़ना है, द एग्जाम्पल्स आर प्रूविंग द थिंग्स देमसेल्व्स। सो एज आई सेड, डायस्पोरा के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में योर orientation should be first of all where the diaspora is concentrated. North America, US, Canada. In Europe you have UK, more than 1 million. Gulf countries, right, 9 million diaspora. ठीक है, ये बड़े बड़े डायस्पोराज है, अफ्रीका में भी है, साउथ ईस्ट एशिया में भी है। तो पहला तो ये, अब यहाँ पे कहाँ पे पूछा, अमेरिका एंड यूरोपियन कंट्रीज, राइट। आंसर कैसे करना है, ठीक है, तो ये रहा। कुछ तो स्टेटमेंट्स, जैसे कि अगर न्यूज़पेपर पढ़ रहे हो मान लो कभी कभी, तो उसकी हेडलाइन ही आपका कोट हो सकता है, इंडियन डायस्पोरा सर्व्स एज अ लिविंग ब्रिज कनेक्टिंग इंडिया टू दी वर्ल्ड, राइट। इंडिया यूएस के केस में, इंडिया यूके रिलेशन के केस में, दिस इज एन इंपॉर्टेंट लाइन, ऑल राइट, स्टेटमेंट ऑफ मिनिस्टर ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स, राइट। तो ये है, तो यहां पे अब बहुत सारे एग्जांपल्स ये है, एट द कोर ऑफ द यूएस इंडिया पार्टनरशिप आर द काउंटलेस पर्सनल फ्रेंडशिप फॉर्म्ड ओवर ईयर्स बिटवीन इंडिविजुअल अमेरिकन एंड इंडियंस एज दे स्टडी, वर्क, लिव एंड लर्न टुगेदर, राइट। ये पैट्रिशिया लासीना ने रिसेंटली कहा, शी इज अ यूएस ऑफिशियल। तो ये आपको एक सेंस दे रहा है, ऑल राइट, कि बेसिकली हाउ डू यू थिंक अबाउट डायस्पोरा। पीपल आर डूइंग बिजनेस, पीपल आर विजिटिंग अदर कंट्रीज एज टूरिस्ट, पीपल आर गोइंग देयर एज स्टूडेंट्स, राइट। सो इट्स अ फ्लो विच लिंक्स कंट्रीज। नाउ अमेरिका कहाँ है और यूरोप कहाँ है। इन यूएस 10th लार्जेस्ट डायस्पोरा, इंडियन डायस्पोरा इज 10th लार्जेस्ट डायस्पोरा इन टर्म्स ऑफ कंट्री ऑफ ओरिजिन। सेकेंड लार्जेस्ट इमिग्रेंट ग्रुप, जो कंटिन्यूअस इमिग्रेशन है, एक तो वो लोग जो जाके बस गए, ऑल राइट, और एक वो जो अभी भी आ जा रहे हैं, राइट। देयर इज इमिग्रेशन गोइंग ऑन एंड देयर आर पीपल हु आर ऑलरेडी सेटल्ड देयर। सो दीज काइंड्स ऑफ नंबर्स, 10th लार्जेस्ट डायस्पोरा, सेकेंड लार्जेस्ट इमिग्रेंट ग्रुप, राइट। 2019 15 million Indian visitors travel to United States. Americans are now second largest group of foreign citizens. ये मैं एग्जाम्पल दे रहा हूँ आपको, पीपल टू पीपल टाइज किसको कहते हैं, ऑल राइट। और डायस्पोरिक लिंकेज से वो बात जुड़ी हुई है। सो डायस्पोरा हर रिलेशन का एक पार्ट हो सकता है, राइट। अप्रॉक्सीमेटली 200,000 इंडियन स्टूडेंट्स currently enrich US university campuses as they pursue higher education opportunities. These 200,000 Indian students who are enrolled in American universities bring about a cumulative of $8 billion to America. All right? ये आपका पैसा है, मतलब इंडिया का पैसा है, right? So this is also, this has an economic aspect also, right? चल, the Indian American diaspora numbers an estimated 4 million. Some sources are now saying 4.9 million if you are looking for additional information. It is roughly 1/3 of all immigrant, so basically Indians own nearly 1/3 of all immigrant founded startups in United States. All right, कुछ का कहना है 25% of all startups in the Silicon Valley. So these are the numbers which are showing economic role of Indians, right? And then जो दूसरा role है वो तो बड़ा आसान है, political, right? Kamala Harris as the Vice President of US, right? Similarly, you have many people of Indian origin in the American administration. You have governors like Bobby Jindal, Nikki Haley, who is now seeking a Republican Party ticket for contesting the presidential election. This is political rule. Cultural भी ढूंढना चाहो मिल जाएगा. Priyanka Chopra living and working in United States is an example of that. But many Indians are involved in, or people of Indian origin are involved in the cultural industry of America also. Netflix की सीरीज देख लो, हर सीरीज में डॉक्टर्स जो है उसका रोल इंडियन ही प्ले कर रहा है, बिकॉज लेस देन 1% ऑफ पॉपुलेशन, 10% ऑफ अमेरिकन डॉक्टर्स आर इंडियंस. ऑल राइट, चलो कैनेडा, इंडियंस 18.6% ऑफ द टोटल नंबर ऑफ पीपल हु इमिग्रेटेड टू द कंट्री. कनाडा का अभी जो सेंसस है उसका डेटा आ रहा है, तो 2016 to 2021, meaning Indians constitute a large number of continuing immigration to US. 2019, so यहाँ पे भी number है more than 1 million Indians, right? 2019, Justin Trudeau's cabinet had 4 people of Indian origin as ministers. किसका example है? Political, right? Harjit Sajjan, Navdeep Bains, Bardish Chaggar, Anita Anand. 17 members of parliament of Indian origin in the current parliament. A very old example is Ujjal Dosanjh. This is an example when I was younger. उस समय I had heard the name of Ujjal Dosanjh, right? Who has been a prominent politician in Canada, right? तो ये हो गया. अब आए आप UK, 1.7 million Indians. इसमें से NRIs, meaning who are citizens of India, 300,000. So meaning there is a settled population, there is also a moving population. 2%, nearly 2% of population of UK is of Indian origin, but they contribute 6% of GDP of the UK. 65,000 companies in UK are owned by people of Indian origin, all right, with more than 30 billion pounds of turnover. All right, economic examples. Politics mein, you have the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Many people celebrated Mr. Rishi Sunak becoming the Prime Minister, but he is still the Prime Minister of UK. है ना? Then in his cabinet, or prior to him in the cabinet, were people like Preeti Patel, who was the previous Home Secretary. The current Home Secretary is Suella Braverman. All right, she is also of Goan origin, Indian origin ही है, पर उन्होंने statement दिया कि Indians overstay. All right, but they are an example of what the question is asking. In Ireland, the current Prime Minister is Leo Varadkar. He is of Indian origin, Goan origin, Maharashtrian origin. He is also a gay person. All right, so an openly gay person, Prime Minister of Ireland, right? And Portugal, Antonio Costa. Antonio Costa is the Prime Minister of Portugal, Goan origin. All right, they are showing you the example of what the question has asked. All right, what is it that the question has asked? This. Indian diaspora has decisive role to play in the politics and economy of America and European countries. Comment with examples. What was of value in this question? Examples. In 10 markers, sometimes if you don't have time, you can work with examples. All right, example लिखने में ही time लग जाएगा. अब आगे चलते हैं. Last 2 questions. Quadrilateral security dialogue is transforming itself into a trade bloc from a military alliance in present times. Discuss. Interesting thing. Neither the Quad ever defined itself as a military alliance, nor has it ever said that it is transforming into an economic bloc. So that's why you cannot take questions literally. You have to think what the context is. All right. So if such question comes, you simply have to say, if somebody has this opinion, what do they mean? Why are they saying so? Introduction, simple, what Quad is. So simply Quad is a dialogue platform involving 4 major democracies of the Indo-Pacific with shared values and interests. All right. Quad is a dialogue platform of the 4 major democracies of Indo-Pacific with shared values and interests. It has diverse areas of focus, which is the subject of dialogue. It is widely seen as a counter to China's assertion and rise and the threat posed by it to the interests and values of these countries. Right? In this context, many see Quad's potential in it transforming itself into a trade bloc. So through the language you basically convey that you don't agree with it, you don't need to agree with it, but you will be trying to explain it. All right. So many see, or many observers see the potential of Quad in transforming itself into an economic bloc. ठीक है, अब कुछ इंटरेस्टिंग चीजें दिखा देता हूँ. ये क्वेश्चन भी लोगों को मुश्किल लगा होगा क्योंकि Quad कभी कहता नहीं है वो एक ब्लॉक है, अलायंस है, तो आपको कैसे पता होगा. तो इसीलिए अखबार पढ़ते रहने का फायदा है. ये 2020 में आर्टिकल आया, रीइमेजिनिंग द क्वाड एज अ ट्रेड अलायंस. ऑलराइट, basically an academic paper where some scholars had built a model. What would happen if Quad countries enter into an FTA? So they are saying that they would form a formidable economic or trade grouping. Second is Mr. Mukesh Aghi wrote this article, A free trade agreement between Quad nations, vision or reality? हर जगह दिख रहा है question mark. So it means this was a debatable issue. This was in debate. Question का form कोई भी हो, intent, क्योंकि Quad ने कभी अपने को military alliance कहा था? नहीं कहा. Quad ने कभी कहा हम trade block बन रहे हैं? नहीं कहा. तो अगर आप literal approach लेंगे तो आप context miss कर रहे हैं. That's why हर question में कहता है in the context of this. All right. So here these people are talking about it. 2020 का article है. All right. Let's look at what comes out of this, right? What comes out of this is this. One, Mohammad M. Rahman, Chanwan Kim, Prabir Day, these scholars had simulated trade agreements. They said Quad trade agreement, जहाँ पे you reduce bilateral tariffs, यहाँ पे फायदा होगा इंडिया को. India's real GDP could increase by 0.2% or 2.7 billion. Meaning, the potential of Quad as a trade bloc is seen in a scenario where they focus on trade and thereby they move towards a free trade agreement. There would be benefits. All right. So, यहाँ पे India's exports would benefit, like clothing, textiles, light manufacturing, etc. In the second scenario क्या है कि भाई you lower the tariff but you also address other trade costs. All right, regulatory costs, etc. ये दोनों अगर आपने काम किया, so what would happen? Trade cost को 25% कम किया, तो what would happen? India's real GDP could increase by 2%, 23.5 billion a year, and then what you will see is that this is the reason why people would be saying that Quad should transform itself into a trade alliance. Quad may become a trade alliance. Quad's potential lies in trade alliance or trade partnership. ठीक है, trade bloc अगर बन जाए तो. Why? Because if you look at them, they have a complicated relation with China. All of them have China among their largest trading partners. All of them have trade deficit with China. All of them have been talking about supply chain diversification. ठीक है, इस तरह की चीजें. और अब तो हम बात करें डी रिस्किंग. ऑल राइट, डीकपलिंग, चाइना से कैसे अलग होना है. तो दैट्स व्हाई इफ क्वाड इन इट्स बैकड्रॉप हैज काउंटरिंग China's assertion and rise in mind, it would have to work on these kinds of alternatives which make sense through numbers. All right, reasonable है ऐसा सोचना. राइट, नाउ कुछ नंबर्स आपको हमेशा याद रहने चाहिए, जैसे ट्रेड क्या है दो देशों के बीच में, मेजर लोगों के बीच में. तो अगर ये नहीं पता होता आपको, दिस इज अ टेक्निकल पॉइंट, राइट. इफ यू हैव read it, you have read it. If you have not, you have not. But you certainly know certain things. What is the size of American economy? What is the size of Japanese economy? Right? At least इतना तो पता है ना. First largest economy, third largest economy is Japan. All right, and Australia, major economy of the Indo-Pacific region. Right? The four countries with over 1.8 billion people represent a quarter of the world's population. All right. Why the argument that Quad transforms itself into economic alliance? Because the numbers 1.8 billion, meaning it becomes a larger market than China. All right. Some countries like Australia would have to find an alternative market. Right? China को सबसे ज़्यादा एक्सपोर्ट करता है ऑस्ट्रेलिया. चाइना से अचानक से कैसे हट जाए, तो एक बड़ा मार्केट चाहिए. सो यू आर क्रिएटिंग अ लार्ज मार्केट. ऑल राइट, एंड देयर बाय व्हाट काइंड ऑफ मार्केट? गरीब लोगों का मार्केट या फिर पीपल हु कैन ऑल्सो बाई? सो द कंबाइंड जीडीपी ऑफ दीज कंट्रीज इज 30 trillion US dollars. So meaning a reasonably prosperous market. Now you see, even if China singularly becomes the largest economy, it is not going to surpass the combined size of these economies. All right, so that's potential is what is being asked. In my opinion, that was a premature question. In my opinion, that was injustice to the students. लेकिन आंसर तो इसका ऐसा ही लिखा जाता. All right, what the potential is. Right, trade between the four countries exceeds 440 billion in 2018. All right, right now also it is around 500 billion US dollars. All right, 500 billion US dollars के आसपास ट्रेड इनके बीच में, with nearly 6 trillion in trade with the rest of the world. So they are also important trading countries. What is the trump card that China has, right? That China has emerged as one of the large trading countries, right? What is China's external trade? 3 trillion. All right. So again, what you see is here you have the potential of these countries which is responsible for these arguments. All right. Apart from that, apart from having a common complex relation with China, some of these countries in a combination or the other are involved in certain initiatives which has economic impact, like Blue Dot Network for infrastructure financing certification. Australia, Japan, United States. All right. Supply Chain Resilience Initiative launched by Australia, India and Japan 2020. All right. India, Japan CEPA. India and Japan have free trade agreement, comprehensive economic partnership agreement. RCEP. India till 2019 was a participant in the negotiations to RCEP. RCEP still has Australia and Japan as its members. All right. So that means that in their diplomatic outreach, economic activities have been important. The need is CPTPP, which is Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. All right. 11 countries led by Japan have created this free trade agreement. Right. So in the Indo-Pacific, if economy and trade are to be focused upon, the Quad countries can benefit by transforming themselves into a trading bloc. But for that to happen, they would need to first of all address their bilateral challenges जो भी है उनके trade में. Second, they would need to create looser arrangements first. For example, they can decide for cooperation in a particular sector. All right. Let's say they decide to cooperate in agriculture, right, as a common project, or connectivity infrastructure as a common project. So your conclusion should have moved towards acknowledging the potential. So through the above discussion, it is evident that the arguments about Quad transforming into an economic bloc are rooted in the potential of these countries, or are rooted in real numbers, right? But the potential to be realized requires concerted diplomatic action of negotiating and entering into agreements which are beneficial to all. All right. So there is not too much of a trick in introduction and conclusion. You should be quick about them. You should develop frameworks. इसीलिए practice करना, अधिक से अधिक टेस्ट सीरीज की practice क्यों करना? Different kinds of questions. How would I structure it, and how would I then write introductions and conclusions? It saves your time in the examination, right? तो ये हो गया. अब जो है the last question, again a question which would have allowed you, which would have asked you to basically apply your mind, because ये कहीं ready-made नहीं मिलेगा. Read the question. What is the significance of Indo-Pacific defense deals over Indo-Russian defense deals? Question mark. Discuss with reference to stability in the Indo-Pacific. यहाँ पे context पे ध्यान दो, otherwise answer नहीं कर पाओगे, right? Indo-Pacific. So first of all, Indo-Pacific is a reference to how Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean are increasingly viewed as linked and common geostrategic domain with multiple opportunities and challenges, right? India has good relations with both United States and Russia. So ये तो आपको करना, acknowledge करना पड़ेगा. ऐसा नहीं करना है कि US ज़्यादा बेहतर है और रशिया ज़्यादा बेहतर नहीं है, right? In the context of Indo-Pacific, stability in the Indo-Pacific, वो establish करने से पहले आपको पहले थोड़ा comparison दिखाना पड़ेगा, right? With Russia we have old and traditional defense ties. From the Cold War period till this period, more than 60% of India's defense imports have been sourced from Russia, right? Most major platforms used by Indian military are of Russian origin, whereby the arrangement has been from procurement, but procurement has majorly dominated the engagement, but there is also license production and joint production, meaning some things we produce in India via a license from Russia. Sukhoi 30 for example, HAL में बनता है, रिपेयर एंड रिफर्बिशमेंट का भी अरेंजमेंट है उसमें, को प्रोडक्शन है हमारा, जॉइंट प्रोडक्शन है हमारा ब्रह्मोस, ऑल राइट. एंड देन देयर आर वेरियस प्रोजेक्ट्स इन द पाइपलाइन. देयर इज अ रीसेंट प्रोजेक्ट ऑफ AK-203 राइफल्स, इंडो रशियन राइफल्स लिमिटेड, वो लेटर डेवलपमेंट है, बट प्राइमरली प्रोक्योरमेंट के लिए रशिया हैड बीन अ reliable partner, right? But Russian technology or access to advanced technology from Russia gradually became difficult, increasingly is becoming difficult, right? अभी देख लो यूक्रेन वॉर, उससे पहले देख लो काटसा, right? Countering of American adversary through Sanctions Act. In this context, and in the quest of India's quest for diversifying its defense supplies, defense relations with US have been one of the prime driver of India-US relations. It has developed in a step-by-step approach. All right. So first we have Defense Framework Cooperation Agreement. Then in 2012 we also have a DTTI, Defense Technology and Trade Initiative. All right, which talks about joint co-production. अमेरिका के केस में हम कहते हैं co-design and co-production. रशिया के केस में हम कहते हैं joint production. All right, and joint R&D. वो है. Right, and then there is this systematic approach of US designating India as a major defense partner. All right, major defense partner. 2016, then we signed 4 foundational agreements. All right, so it has created a more stable and sustainable basis of defense cooperation with some important differences also. All right, so far our defense engagement based on these agreements is focused on defense acquisition, like more than 20 billion US dollars. 2008 onwards we started buying from Americans. So far we have bought 20 billion US dollars. The promise of DTTI is not yet fulfilled in terms of joint production. अब क्या हो गया है, इंडिया और यूएस ने कुछ और भी लॉन्च कर दिया है, इनिशिएटिव ऑन critical and emerging technology. So now many people are saying DTTI is subsumed within the ICET, लेकिन अभी भी कोई रिजल्ट नहीं दिख रहा, right? But it has a sustained basis, a very clear blueprint. Secondly, in the context of Indo-Pacific, we have an agreement called, one of the foundational agreements is Logistics Support Agreement. All right, we don't have a logistics support agreement with Russia. So in the Indo-Pacific, US has more bases, US has better logistical presence. All right, so that's something that differentiates US from Russia, not because it is better here, etc. etc. So ये आपको दिखाना है systematic approach and traditional partnership. Systematic approach, much wide-ranging possibility of cooperation, but limitation भी है. Co-production अभी भी नहीं हुआ. रशिया के साथ public sector involvement, US के साथ public as well as DTTI में भी और ICET में भी हम बात कर रहे हैं पब्लिक सेक्टर प्लस प्राइवेट सेक्टर. अमेरिका के साथ प्राइवेट सेक्टर का कोऑपरेशन करना पड़ेगा. देयर मेजर डिफेंस मैन्युफैक्चरर्स आर इन द प्राइवेट सेक्टर. ऑल राइट, सो दैट्स अनदर डिफरेंस बिकॉज रशिया वाज अ स्टेट कंट्रोल्ड इकोनॉमी. इट्स डिफेंस सेक्टर मेनली कंप्राइज्ड ऑफ डिफेंस स्टेट कंट्रोल्ड कंपनीज. यूएस के साथ प्राइवेट सेक्टर का भी इन्वॉल्वमेंट है. लॉजिस्टिक सपोर्ट एग्रीमेंट एक मेजर डिफरेंस है. और अल्टीमेटली कंक्लूजन पे आपको पहुंचते हुए ये कहना है, बोथ रशिया एंड यूएस आर वाइटल पार्टनर्स ऑफ इंडिया, whereas India has developed a closer understanding for the need of stability in the Indo-Pacific with US. Russia remains skeptical of the term Indo-Pacific and arrangements like Quad because it views it from the prism of US foreign policy. रशिया को पसंद नहीं है इंडो पैसिफिक के बारे में बात करना. रशिया डज नॉट इवन यूज द टर्म इंडो पैसिफिक. रशिया स्टिल यूजेस द टर्म एशिया पैसिफिक. ऑल राइट, सो यहाँ पे जो है ज्यादा कन्वर्जेंस ऑफ व्यूज ऑन इंडो पैसिफिक, ऑन द फ्यूचर ऑफ इंडो पैसिफिक इज विथ यूएस. बट यहीं पे ट्रिक है कि आप कहीं लीन ना करो, तो आप हमेशा इंडिया की पोजीशन याद रखो. एंड इन लाइट ऑफ द अबव फैक्टर, इट मस्ट बी रिमेंबर that India has always advocated for a free, open, और तीसरा वर्ड इंपॉर्टेंट है, इंक्लूसिव इंडो पैसिफिक. जापान यूएस फ्री ओपन करते रहते हैं, ये इंडिया है जो कहता है फ्री ओपन एंड इंक्लूसिव. वाई? वी मस्ट नॉट फॉरगेट दैट रशिया ऑल्सो इज अ पैसिफिक कंट्री. ऑल राइट, इट ऑल्सो हैज अ कोस्ट इन दी पैसिफिक। तो ये इंडिया का अप्रोच है, सबको साथ में लेके चलेंगे। ऑल राइट, सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास, वॉट एवर जार्गन वर्क्स फॉर यू। माई पर्पज सिंपली वॉज नॉट टू सिंपली टेल यू कैसे आंसर लिखना, स्ट्रक्चर वक्चर आपको पता है, सिंपली टू टेल यू कि ए, मेंटेन रेगुलरिटी विथ स्टडीज, हैव अ लिस्ट ऑफ कोटेशंस, numbers, names of agreements, this would be your data, all right, and through that only you can fill content in the structure. Never go to the extreme, always remember India's position, all right, when answering questions on IR in GS2. Thank you very much for your time and attention. You have been patient. Hopefully it was helpful.